Hello and welcome to episode 86 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me as ever is Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. How are you doing?
Not bad. Not bad, you?
Yeah, I'm getting there slowly but surely. Before we go anywhere, let's talk about Element Games. Why not? Your place for all your hobby stuffs. I don't know what's coming out this week. We're recording on the Friday. I don't know what's up for pre-order this week. But very soon we've got all the Age of Sigmar, whatever it's called now, the Elves of Marathi. I think she might be a model some Emperor's Children players might grab hold of. Particularly 40K.
I think that, I thought that, but that's because I'm very heresy-centric. Whenever I see a model, I think, how can I use it in heresy? Yeah,
so if you haven't seen it, Marathi is an elf who can turn into this big snake beast with wings, and a number of people have commented how it might be the time to try and do a full demonic Fulgrim model. It does look fantastic, to be fair. In fact, that whole line looks fantastic. I don't know how many are useful for heresy, but if you are interested in Age of Sigmar, there's some really cool stuff going on with that. And all the usual stuff as well. All the tools, all the airbrushes. You can go and get airbrushes and compressors, paints, glue, you name it. It's all available there. And in fact, some of those, as a brief tangent, we won't go on too much, but GW just announced, it's just come out at one of the trade shows, was a load of new games as well. Blood Bowl, like mini Blood Bowl, like Blood Bowl 7's type thing, a little lunch hour version of the game, and that Necron maze runner kind of thing, and they're pumping stuff out, or their their license holders are pumping stuff out at least.
Definitely.
Yeah, plus computer games as well. So there is
loads of computer games.
Exactly.
Games everywhere.
There are so many computer games, and some of them look really good. Hopefully I can get a new computer soon and get to actually play some. You never know. But yeah, go to Element Games, go through the link in the show notes, or go via the advert on the website, and that helps support us. And the other thing is another big shout out for all the Patreons. Thank you for supporting the show. It is greatly appreciated. So Neil, it's that Heresy weekend. Has it been a lull for you post Heresy weekend, or has it been a dry?
It's like you read my mind.
Yeah.
It's been a bit lully sort of vibe. I haven't really been very motivated. I've been doing a bit of Corax's Wings, but not really to any sort of let's try and paint every night and let's stay up late and all this sort of stuff. So I'm a little bit on the go slow. I bought the one of my next projects, which was the Primaris Apothecary guy.
Oh yeah.
That I wanted to do for Classic. So I've purchased him and spent a night just sticking him together for a bit of a break from it all, and that was quite enjoyable. But apart from that, I haven't really done a lot, really. I haven't been doing many nights painting, so I really haven't been very productive. How about you? Have you got much stuff done? Or
well, this week's been a little bit busy. I'm going to the Company of Legends in end of March. Had to get our lists in a few days ago, and sat there kind of thinking about what I want to take, what I want to get painted, what I want to purchase, what's in storage, and wrote my first list up. I thought, cool, got a second list. What do I do differently? I could get the porphyrin out, but I did that last time, and actually I want to, that needs kind of work to pin the arms in. I possibly have removable pins or magnets, whichever way I'm going to do that. I haven't decided yet, but either way that needs some work. Don't really want to do that. I've got a few knights here, and then I was like, well, like one of the Imperial Knights is almost fully painted, but a little bit broke off, so I'm going to have to bodge a repair job on like the shoulder-mounted little gun. And then I noticed my Atropos was sitting there with the Atropos is fully painted, complete. It's just the base needed doing. So I was like, you know what? I can have them with Mechanicum. So, I'll throw an Atropos in. So literally just kind of got on the base of that, and that's all I need for Heresy for a little while. So I was like, cool, I can get on with my Warhammer, and then I broke my airbrush. So I am.
It always happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can
Worst
be a little.
times.
I got it already, and the only reason I broke it is because it was like, yeah, I left this in a bit of a state. It needs a good deep clean. So I borrowed my tool to take the nozzle off because mine's in storage. So I borrowed one off Dan. I got home and then just stupidly went the wrong way on it, for all too brief a point, and broke it off, and the thread's stuck in the.
So do you have to have a special tool then to take your nozzle off?
Well, it's a mini spanner, but it's
okay.
I don't have any other tools. It's just good to have. It's designed for that purpose.
My Badger is, I think, it's all finger screw sort of design.
It's one of those things.
Obviously, I haven't managed to do any real damage to it. I've lost bits, but I haven't managed to do any damage.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I think I try and do it up finger tight, but I don't think I did. And I'm quite, like my fingers, I'm not very, it's a small piece of gear, and I've got, these flipping chubby old hands, big hands.
Big fat fingers.
Yeah, big fat sausage fingers. So, but just foolishly went at it, kind of like not concentrating maybe 100% what I was doing. So it's
easily done though, isn't it? When you just think, right, I was going to quickly get this done, and it's so easy to rush something and then cause a lot of damage.
Just a silly schoolboy error. I've broken one once before that. I was doing it up. So I learned my lesson on that one, just not on taking it apart.
Oh, right. So the threads, I suppose with a tool though, threads can be quite easy to break, I suppose, because if you've got that extra leverage, you can.
Yeah, exactly.
You could easily break it.
That is the problem, and I should just do it up finger tight and maybe just just finish it off gently with the tool. But, again, lesson learned. I'll have to buy another one, or, I know that, CK Studios have got a deal with Badger, and at their course, they're in the UK course, they're just trying to work out how or if they can get that deal to work with the distributors that Badger have got over here. Obviously, it's a bit easier in America where they can get them sent to them. So I'll message them to see what is on offer. It might be a chance to get a new airbrush. And we were talking before the show, if I've got an airbrush that is recommended by the guys I'm then going to get the information off, when they're doing the stuff, if they have a problem, I know airbrushes aren't that different, but you do hear that actually, some of them do have their own little inconsistencies or whatever between them. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's like when you're doing anything, when someone says, they're doing a painting demo or something, they say, well, I've used this paint and I've done this, this and this. The easiest thing is to have that paint and copy it exactly rather than trying to reinvent it all the time.
And that means that then, I will get this one fixed anyway, but then I've got a spare so that if this happens again, I can still go. The other option is, I've got to get in there and try and get this out, because it's snapped off and left the thread in there. So I managed to get it off last time. I should be able to get it out. But it means I've got that one there. Yeah, I could just buy 2 nozzles and make sure that works. But, we'll see. We'll see how much it costs and how much it's worth doing. Because I've not treated this one particularly well either. So it does, we'll see. We'll see. It's something to think about. So there we go. Just be careful, everybody, when using tools on your nozzles. Everyone's probably like, oh, you don't do that. That's how you learn sometimes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's the mistakes you make help you to get better, don't they? So once you've replaced that nozzle a couple of times, you'll make sure you don't do it again.
To quote DC Talk, some people got to learn the hard way. So, and I tend to find that I'm one of those at times. Sometimes I'm not, sometimes I am. But it's all fun. So in the meantime, I'm like, well, I've got a brush. I'll get on with some more shade spot.
Yes, yeah.
It's just some more shade spot to do. We're getting closer and closer to kind of moving into the new house. That's when I can really kind of go, right, let's get stuff out. Let's make sure it's all there. Let's crack on. Fingers crossed that will happen soon. You talked about classic demons, so you're going to do the apothecary. How many parts are you painting him in?
Right, what you mean, like sub-assemblies?
Yeah.
Well, I've sort of suddenly stuck him all together. but I've done certain bits with super glue and certain bits with plastic glue, so I know I'm going to snap bits off. So the arms will come off, backpack will come off, the head will come off, one of the legs, because he's got this raised leg thing going on.
Yeah.
I've straightened that foot out, so I'm obviously putting him on a different base. So I've straightened that leg out, green stuffed a few bits of it, but that leg will be separate, so I can get into all the recesses. And I've then converted both his arms. So one arm I've got rid of the pistol holding arm and changed it for one out of the Dark Imperium set.
Sure,
the one that's sort of it's got an open hand. And in the other hand, I've scraped out the little gland. Is it the progenoid gland he's looking at, or some part of the Space Marine?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the model.
I've carved that out, and he's basically looking into a commander's helmet.
Okay.
And in the background, the commander's armor will be all basically laid out on on like a gurney, and he's basically obviously been working on the commander, so he's just sort of staring into the damaged helmet.
Okay, that's cool.
So yeah, it's going to look quite cool. I think it's going to be. I mean, at the moment, I've just doing chopping bits up and just seeing how they fit and lay out, etc., etc. But yeah, it should be quite cool once it's all done.
Excellent. You gonna have enough time?
Yeah, I think so, because it is. I know. So I probably said this too many times, but it's only one model, so it's not going to be too strenuous. But it's. Yeah, I think I'll be all right. Just got to knuckle down and do a bit of it. Really, the one that's scaring me is I thought that I'd have him as an Imperial Fist,
right.
And then I thought, and I'll do this other set of armor in the background. I thought, that's going to be yellow.
Yeah,
that's going to be a pain.
So change plan.
Yeah, a bit worried about that part. There might be a chapter change when I start considering how much time I've got to paint, because I don't fancy doing too much yellow.
I mean, you could have an Imperial Fist successor. Why Imperial Fist? Why Imperial Fist?
Well, okay, so I thought about it and thought I didn't want to do Ultramarines.
Sure.
Then I thought, okay, let's look at the other chapters. Blood Angels, they don't really work well with Apothecaries, do they? Because it would be more of a sanguinary priest.
Yeah, okay.
Same with Space Wolves.
Yeah.
Again, you wouldn't have that sort of thing. And again, steered away from Dark Angels.
Sure.
So then I started thinking, right, who have I got left? And then I went, okay, well, Imperial Fists or another chapter, like a successor chapter. And I just felt as though the yellow might contrast quite nicely with the white. I'll do like a very sort of like dark, like almost like black to bright yellow sort of scheme for it, so that it sort of stood out a bit. But I'm not 100% yet on what it will be. So it could well change in between now and then.
Yeah, I mean the beauty of doing 40k is there's so many canonical different colours you can go for different chapters.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So like someone like a Black Templar could be awesome.
Yes.
On there.
Yes.
But I want you to do Howling Griffins.
Do what is this thing with you and Howling Griffins?
They're awesome. They're so cool. It's got the yellow on it as well. Yellow and red. It's fine. It works. Or choose one of those really awful colours, because there are some awful colour combinations on some of those old Marines. But no, that's cool. Awesome. So that's for Warhammer Fest, and we had some information about the Golden Demon at Warhammer Fest released.
Yeah, so Max and the team have been working on some new clarifications, and they've posted up all the refined categories, and they've done some nice PDFs which sort of go through the categories and make it quite clear to people what goes in what. And I think they're quite simple. They haven't gone over the top with trying to paint everything out, but they've been quite clear in, like, Primarchs aren't in large, they are in single, etc., etc.
Sure,
which I know last year was a bit of a contention because they announced it on the Warhammer TV, but they didn't put it anywhere else. So when people then were getting their models moved about on the day, people were sort of a bit upset that they'd not been like officially told.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's all. Yeah, that all got announced. There was
the big thing is
obviously
the Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah, the big thing was, and I spoke to, I think we might have spoken about this on the last show actually, I spoke to Max and, was it Max and Aidan were there? Yeah, Max and Aidan. And we spoke about the classic, and then we mentioned about, would you be doing it over 2 days rather than the one? Because we spoke about how the Heresy Golden Demon is so brilliant because you put all your models in on the Saturday. They have Saturday night when no one's around to photograph everything. Yeah. And then the judges have a nice full day Sunday to judge all the categories really in depth and make their decisions. So it's a lot more relaxed for the judges. It's a lot more relaxed for everyone entering. And we thought, well, that would be great for Classic. And they've sort of done it, but I think they maybe have done it, they're doing it in baby steps. Well, because it would be tricky to drop it on everyone suddenly.
Yeah, I'm also just not sure that they'll ever go to a 2-day Golden Demon process. Because the extra cost and effort involved from the majority of people who are going to enter.
Yes, there is. I can see that being a problem.
Yeah, I think
with the weekender it works because it's a 2-day ticket anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think this is an attempt at a happy medium, a first attempt. So I'm not saying this is their final idea, and there is opportunity for people who are there 2 days to enter their model, and I suppose for the judges to look at them at that point. Obviously, it's not in the full context, but it can give an idea if they've got enough. However,
the one thing I did think about is sometimes the biggest fear is, are the judges going to see your entry to get you through that first phase? Now, if you put it in on a Saturday, there's a good chance you're going to make sure the judges are going to see it because it's going to be in the cabinet that little bit longer. So there is a slight fringe benefit, but not a huge one.
No, well, I think for this year, just the nature of the fact of when it was announced. Actually, if you're putting your model in the cabinet on the Saturday, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount in there on the Saturday. Because how many people have already prepared to go for 2 days?
Yes, and most people, when they announced the ticket sales, you saw people posting up that they purchased their Sunday ticket and all of this. So I doubt whether many people then will go back and say, I now need a Saturday ticket as well.
No, it will be really interesting next year with the knowledge that it's, it potentially can be a 2-day event for you for Golden Demon, whether people choose to take that option. Personally, I found found with Warhammer Fest is on the Saturday, which is the longer day, so the Sunday's the shorter day as well. There's almost too much to do on the Sunday, and I always on the Saturday I feel, I kind of didn't give enough time to that, whether that's because I didn't use my time properly or not. But I've been for 2 days, and I certainly didn't feel there was enough for 2 days.
Yes, and that would be my issue, that I wouldn't want to have to pay for a hotel knowing that really all I'm doing on that Saturday is putting a model in and not doing. I'd look at everything on Sunday, then I'd be quite bored. I don't think I'd have a lot to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's going to be an interesting one to see how they deal with it. I think at the end of the day, they're still going to get the vast majority of their entries on the Sunday. I mean, if you're coming from abroad, maybe the extra day isn't a major issue. There are hotels actually at the venue, which I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't aware of. If I was going to stay for 2 days and there was a few of us, I'd be tempted to do that. I know there are hotels nearby. I don't know how many. We ended up staying a fair few miles away, and not everyone drives to these events, so I don't know what the setup's like in that respect. But yeah,
I must admit, I think I'd love to see them find a way of bridging it over 2 days, but I don't know how feasible it really is. But I do think it would do the competition a lot of good, because if you could convince people that there was almost like a Golden Demon ticket, where some way that you could drop things off on the Saturday, they could get all the photography done, and then they just had the whole Sunday for judging. I think you would also see the judging work out a lot better. I think, there would be a lot more attention, a lot more diligence. They'd be able to reply to it, rather than sometimes I feel as though they have to motor through it very, very quickly. And there is a chance of things getting missed, things maybe getting, pushed to one side when it shouldn't be. More time they have, I think, would be better. But it's so hard to get that to work within the environment.
I think you either have to have enough there for painters to want to be there for 2 days. So maybe there is more emphasis on the painting at the event. So maybe they do the hobby seminars. So they do the small, like 20 odd people, 30 people sat round, but you're in a room where there's other stuff going on. You can't always make out what's going on. Maybe they provide a space to do that bigger and better over the course of the 2 days, maybe more focused as well, because that could potentially have people want to stay around. But then again, for people at the top of the game, it would almost have to be the level of the heavier metal weekend that you went to, wouldn't it, to make it worthwhile?
Yes, it'd have to be very, very high scale.
Or another option, potentially, and they would need to provide what they're doing a lot earlier, and, we've seen that Games Workshop are reticent to put too much out too early, but maybe having the different categories on different days and then announcing an overall winner.
Oh, okay.
But then you lose an element of having everyone there, and you'd have to, if you're only going to go 1 day, you can only enter so many categories. So again, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I don't see how you split it over 2 days and keep people happy.
Yeah, and the problem is, I was trying to think of a way that you got everyone to go on the Saturday, but then they did the final judging on the Sunday. But then if you didn't know if you were going to get through, you couldn't. Yeah. You then couldn't say, well, you can't book a hotel on the whim of, I hope I get through the next round.
No, and if you book a hotel and you don't get through, then you could be annoyed that you spent that extra money. So, and that's the issue they got. I'm not too sure if anything will majorly change on it. I think
but I mean, it's an interesting step. Yep. If they make something work with it, then great. But I can't see them being able to change it, which is a shame, because I think it would benefit from it.
People like you go there. How much did you actually look around Warhammer Fest last year?
Not a great deal.
Yeah. And that's the same for a lot of the guys at the top who know each other. You all go in, you're trying to keep an eye on each other's models, and then you're all talking to each other about what you've been up to and what you're painting and everything else. So it's not even like you're going to go to Warhammer Fest and enter a model. You're going to Warhammer Fest to enter a model. So, without it being more of a convention type thing with a lot more going on, I don't think a huge amount of change. I can't see Games Workshop moving it to, say, London GT or Blood and Gory Got Big. I can't see them I can't see them moving it away from Warhammer Fest, because that's their big thing. So I understand that. It's completely fair play. So it's an interesting one for them to try and figure out, and they're trying to do something. And if it only helps, a handful of people, 40, 50 people, well, it still helped 40, 50 people. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But there we go. Okay, let's move on from all that. New stuff.
Yes.
Our repeated cycle of getting everything that we've seen. When
we talk about the stuff we've already talked about.
Rogue Dawn, Space Wolves Legion, Grace Layers, Close Combat and Ranged Attack Squads, and Varagir Terminators. Whoever was on GW's Facebook page, on the community Facebook page job today, did a wonderful, wonderful effort of not just going mad at people. It's just the same stuff all over again. The stuff I talked about last time, getting tired about it just doesn't stop. The Varagir are out. They've fixed the mistakes they made. So the pistols are on. The pistols have grips. That's the mistake they made. The rest of it is a design option.
Do you get the email sent through to you?
I did, yeah.
Did you feel that the shots that they had made were almost to try and stop some of those comments?
Yeah, there was.
Where they'd taken the photo of basically like the side of the gun so you could see the grip.
Yep. And the side of the gun so they could show off the bolter and talk about it being a non-standard pattern of bolter. And, fair enough. I've got no problem with Forge Web responding to that because they've obviously seen some of the issues. But on both these squads, on all this stuff, they fixed the mistakes. Now, the fur, you might not like it. We said it again. It's not a mistake. It was a design, whether you like it or not. And that's for me. That's for everyone. But that's a design that now you can not like it and you can express your discontent with it. Do it the right way. The same goes for the quote-unquote upside-down bolters on the grey slayers. Proved to be a design choice because they've come out. And we said last time, I think it would be an amazing effort to accidentally put half of the end of a bolt gun on upside down in CAD, when you think you've probably got bolt guns stock as like, click, I need a bolt gun. Boom. It's a design choice. Again, you might not like it. When you get to worrying about where the iron sight is on a gun that's fired by a Space Marine who's got targeters all over him and everything else, as someone points out, the axes are painted with wooden handles. The force of a Space Marine hitting another Space Marine with an axe with a wooden handle. I mean, it's sci-fi wood, isn't it? We play this game. Yes. The very fact that we have the 41st millennium and still the most effective way to kill a lot of things is to run up and hit it in combat suggests that we're not using a logic that is working in Earth in 2018, So, there are. I'm at the point now where I just kind of want all the Space Wolf stuff to come out, just get it out, and then move on, and then people can forget about it and, just throw the odd meme up online every now and then. But at least we'll be past it.
Because once it's all out, it's almost like it hopefully should all go away, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and it never will because, a lot of people don't like the Varra gear. That's fair enough. A lot of people don't like we've had discussions about the leather masks, One person will like them, one person won't. Whatever. Mm-hmm. But once it's out and we've moved on to the next thing, it just becomes much less of a deal than it is. Would I want, the next Space Wolf unit that's like priced at £60 for 5 Terminators to be better, quote unquote better than the ones that are out? Yes, I actually would. But these are the ones we're getting. They're not changing it. We know that. Cool. Mm. But Dawn looks great.
Dawn's amazing. Still love Dawn.
There's a lot of him going around at the moment, which is pretty cool as well. So
I've seen so many people painting Dawn on Instagram. And also I've noticed a few people painting Dawn in non-metallic schemes that I think they picked up off Andy Wardle's Cult of Paint course.
Oh right.
And I must admit, they're painters some painters that I've looked at and thought, oh, they're quite good, and I've seen their non-metallics now, obviously picking up some tips from Andy, and I've gone, there's a lot of good non-metallic painters now.
Oh no, Neil, you have to step up your game, man.
I am. I'm going to have to try and find some improvements from somewhere, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So and that's been pretty much it. It's been fairly quiet. Again, we're in that weird lull where we know everything's going on. We mentioned it.
We're gonna have that for about 3 or 4 months, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I got sent some of the Orlocks from Necromunda, and I tell you what, if I was doing a militia, I'd probably do them based off the gangs. These models are fantastic.
I very much thought that, and also you could really mix and match. I think those Orlocks work great with the Cultist set as well. Yeah,
as you said, and so I built them, and the sprue has so many more options left on it after building them the way they kind of suggest. They're just so cool, and you can imagine them fitting into into an army, and you could almost go the way that some of the old guard armies did go, where you had the different regiments that were all painted using a similar colour scheme but were different. So the whole point of the militia is it's a rabble band. So they won't always get a uniform. They won't always have the same guns, You'll have farmers who'll bring their guns with them, or whatever. So you could have like Escher and Orlok units in the same army, and just as long as you use the basing right and link the armies a little bit. I mean, you only have to look at old demon armies. Some demon armies would have all 4 gods represented. The colour scheme of the actual demons themselves are wildly different, and yet you can tie it together with the bases. Maybe the odd spot colour on a model will help as well, that goes across all 4 gods. But it does tie together as an army. So I could
definitely.
I could really see, it wouldn't be the quickest paint job because there's a bit of detail on these models, but that's cool, So yeah, it's very tempting, far too tempting is what it is. But I'm sure I'll move on to the next thing after that. But yeah, they are fantastic. And then you've got all those, bounty hunters and characters you can make characters out of as well. Fantastic options. I think we're done for the intro. Unless you've got anything you want to add?
Yes, I think so.
Cool.
No, nothing too amazing.
No worries. We're probably going to talk next about your painting area setup and lighting. Exciting times. So we'll come back after the music and talk about that. Okay, Neil, we're going to chat a little bit about our painting, our hobby area setups. Yeah?
Yes.
Cool with that? So,
yes.
It's something I feel, I don't know, something in me says that we've done it, or maybe I've just talked about how much of a mess mine is or whatever, or maybe we should have done it. I don't know. But it's something that we had kind of there as an idea. So, yes, why not talk about hobby setups, and there are various. Obviously, these are going to be very individual. Not everyone's needs are the same. Some people might live in a 4-bedroom house. Someone's going to live in a bed sit in London. You're going to have very different opportunities to set up an area to hobby, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the key things I found, my hobby setup has very much progressed over the years, and I used to be a person that had to get everything out and then pack it all away.
Sure.
And now I have like a dedicated room, and before that I was sort of squatting in a corner of the room and things. So my hobby setup has evolved over the years. I don't know about yours.
Yeah, definitely. When I live with parents, I remember going to my first ever real big Warhammer event. I used to have all my stuff on a tea tray, and I used to move it downstairs and sit and paint wherever I could. Light was, basic lighting and what have you, and then I'd have to move it all back up. And I remember as it got close to the event, the parents were like, "Oh, cool, yeah, you can keep it down here for a while," because I was painting every night, trying to get ready. Yeah, and I've managed to progress. Hopefully when we get in the new house, we're going to have the studio / hobby room, which is going to be set up, semi-permanently, really, to aid my hobby. So, yeah, it's a bit of a journey, and I think there are quite a few people who start off on those, having to be mobile and kind of move around with what they're doing, and sometimes that comes down to also the one issue I'm going to have. So, shall we say, when I get the room, is not to spend all my time in the hobby room. Because, that's not fair.
I think that's the problem when you have a dedicated room. You then lock yourself away almost.
So
it's the man in shed syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great at certain points, but sometimes you can mix and you can do it easy enough. So there still might be a requirement, and I've heard other people talk about this on 40K podcasts and stuff, to have that period of hobby that you can do in front of the TV still. So there's still, in a weird way, I might cycle back to having that little mobile hobby area as well, so that I can make sure I'm spending time with the other half.
Yeah, that's interesting, because what I sometimes find I do is if I've bought a new model, say it be a new character series model or something like that, I will then end up doing a bit of hobby outside of my room. So I'll be washing the model and doing bits and pieces and building. I find I might do that in the sort of more family areas.
Yeah.
So I've got a little bit more interaction, but then as soon as it comes down to actually obviously getting any paint down, that's when I then sort of switch back into my little den and sort of lock myself away, because obviously I've got all my proper setup there. But I do like to try and get out if I can, to try and see a bit of
absolutely,
see the family and do a few bits and pieces more socially.
Otherwise, this can take up all your time. And I think do Games Workshop still make that lap tray they used to do? Because I saw people using that.
I think they do. Yeah.
I mean, it thoroughly depends on how big your legs are as to whether it actually fits over your legs. But having one of those like cushioned trays, like, can be good for, as I say, spending time with the other half, with family, in the front room, doing, maybe it's some basic putting together, or, as you say, some washing of models. That's something we have to do with resin. You don't need to be sat in a separate room to wash resin. You can be on the sofa watching a film if you're, sensible and careful about what you're doing. I know people would do, say, certain aspects of undercoating if they paint undercoat on at certain periods. Things like that can, as you say, be done. And I think those cushioned, those laptop trays kind of things can be really useful for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that there are obviously quite a few different ways of keeping it mobile. Those little trays are great because you can bring a few bits. I think it really depends on what level you're going to as well.
Yeah.
If you're looking to do things quite in a simple, simplistic way, and you're not too concerned, then you can have a bit of a mobile setup. You can get a few paints in and out. If you're going to be using 50 or 80 paints and you want your lamp and you need your airbrush and all that sort of stuff, that's all more fixed, and you need to be more around a desk, maybe, something along those lines. But yeah, definitely. If you're just thinking, do you know what, I've got, 10 guys and I just need to get some base colours on and I've got 2 pots of paint, then you can quite easily sort of set that up as a little lap tray and away you go. I
might build my 10 Marines from Calf, but I won't build my Night Porphyrian. Right? You're sensible with it. So it's important to remember that as well. That's, an aspect of, we're lucky. You and I, we're going to have those permanent setups where we can have an airbrush. We can have all that set up. And not everyone can. So it's important to remember that as well.
I was chatting to, I think it's Dave from the Spacemen with Guns podcast at the Richard Gray painting event.
Sure.
And he mentioned that he has a little lap tray set up, but he has a little head torch.
Cool.
So you can see while his other half, his girlfriend, is watching the telly, he'll have a little headlamp on and be painting away. Because we were all talking about, lamps and bits and pieces, and he mentioned that's what he paints with on a day-to-day basis. Which I suppose if you're doing certain things, you can probably get away with that. You
absolutely.
Can sort of stick a lamp on and away you go.
Yeah, and everything we're talking about here, it's all relative, isn't it, to your situation, what you're trying to achieve, particularly when we get into some of the equipment later on. That's very much how much you want to spend is dependent on what you are trying to do. So it's important to remember that you don't always need to spend all the big money. And sometimes that in itself is kind of a trap to fall into anyway. But I think a lot of people do have an area, whether that's permanently set up, whether they have to get their gear out to use it. I think most people have that table that is their space for when they are able to hobby. Protecting that surface is always a good thing, isn't it? Or
yes,
if you don't have a surface that you can ruin. So I've had some old tables where it didn't really matter because they were pretty rubbish when I got them. So spilling some paint on it, scratching it with a knife wasn't a major issue. But, as you progress, hopefully the stuff you get in your house you want to keep to a certain level.
Yeah. I mean, what are you a fan of? I mean, obviously I used to have a lot of cutting mats, and I know a lot of people that use those for...
Yeah.
They use them for almost paint palettes as well. They'll just chuck paint on a cutting mat as well. Do you ever use that?
I have done. I've purchased the Games Workshop, mats. We talked about them a little bit. For what they are, I find them really good actually. they're probably cheaper options out there, but it looks good. It's a nice, decent work area, and it can contain any issues I've got. Agrax Earthshade goes everywhere. It's fine. It's cool. It's all on the mat.
Yeah.
And it rolls off. It sticks. It's not gonna accidentally move anywhere. Yeah, that works fine. I mean, for some people, it's just throwing down newspaper. Just making sure when they're painting, they are not getting everything. I know plenty of people who still do that. It works. Of course, some of the paint's going to seep through newspaper. You need more than one thing. It always just annoys me a little bit, the newspaper going down. I don't know why. It's just one of those irrational kind of things I have where it's like, I don't want to use newspaper. No idea.
Yeah,
why.
in fact, actually, thinking about it, where I do most of my painting is like, hairy brush painting. I find that obviously my work area is quite consolidated, and although I do have a mat down, which is mainly for purposes of me laying a model down and I don't want it to get damaged, apart from my paint palette, I'm not too concerned about spillages.
Right.
However, with an airbrush, because I've recently got into airbrushing, I'm massively conscious of overspray and getting paint somewhere where I shouldn't get it and things like that, and that's where my concern comes from.
Do you use an extraction facility or anything like that for the
I've got one of those sort of weird contraptions, and I've used it a couple of times, which is what my main thing for trying to make sure I don't get paint to go over. But I find with an airbrush, sometimes even that's not enough.
Yeah.
I find that sometimes, I need to squirt this. I don't want to squirt this at the model. It's got cleaner in it or whatever. And you've got the little pot. And sometimes I find myself just spraying stuff off to the side. And then I think, well, hold on a second, where's that going? And then I go, okay, I'll get a bit of tissue on that. And then I'm thinking, I'm surely not doing this as controlled as I should be.
No.
I think with a normal brush, it's very much sort of, paint from pot onto palette and then onto model. It's very controlled, but with an airbrush, it's sort of like spray it any which way you like and hope it doesn't go in the wrong place.
Yeah. So in my flat, I wasn't near a window, so having any kind of contraption to try and take that out would have been, a bit silly, really. So I ended up making this kind of ghetto, it's this cardboard box with the foam that you carry models in. Layered around it, and the idea is actually that foam is loads of little bits, it's all spongy, and will kind of hold those paint particles a bit more than anything else. So when I airbrush into that, so the overspray goes in there. It's not going to catch everything by any stretch of the imagination, but it will catch a fair amount. And it also gives me somewhere then, as you say, when sometimes you just need to spray, that I can just spray straight onto that foam and it's contained. And then that box can then be moved.
Interesting thing I picked up from the course I went on is when they mentioned about not using paper towel to spray onto, or I don't know if have you been told this?
I've never tried it.
That they tell you to use J cloths, not paper towel.
All right, okay.
Because paper towel, because it's obviously fibrous.
Yeah.
If you're spraying and stuff, if you're tearing it or whatever, then if you get those little paper particles in the air and that goes into your airbrush, you end up spraying those through the airbrush and onto the model. So a J cloth is like a what's it called? Non-fibrous. I don't know.
Yeah,
you end up with bits won't come off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've started trying to do that as well now to try and not get too many bits over models and things.
Sure.
But I'm still learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to learn all this myself. And the beauty of having my setup with that foam, I mean, it's not ideal. There's no worries about that. But I place them into the box. They don't move. I move the box around. So I'm not disturbing that foam all the time.
Yes.
And doing that. So that's another thing that I keep, with the airbrush and whatever, and wheel it out when I need to, because my airbrushing stuff actually can sit a little bit separate, because when I'm going to airbrush, I know I have to get everything ready, and that's, airbrushing it's great, but there is a certain amount of work involved in setup and takedown of the airbrush anyway, so it doesn't make a difference if I've got to walk across the room, grab my airbrush paints, and then get ready to go. obviously with a new setup, hopefully I'll get some racking up or something like that. But at the moment I don't. So that's cool. Yeah, and then, I mean, shamefully, I've got like a couple of glasses to hold paintbrushes, but all my tools are just spread out across the table. This is
I'm probably need. I'm looking at my area now. I do need to be a bit more organised with tools. I think I chuck all mine into a character series mod box. Like, you always spoke about the black boxes being really handy.
Yes, they are.
I've got one that I just chuck all my tools into, and that's my toolbox. So that's I'm probably not super organised, but at least I try and keep them all in one area, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's part of it. At least you need to be able to know you can find it. That's the first step. And that, again, it's more important when you haven't got space, because you can't just have things lying around. The danger is when you've got more space, you fill it. And so you end up with this actually working in the same area that you were working in beforehand. You just got more stuff around you. So having something like a box, a pot that you can keep your tools in, and then it comes down to need, doesn't it? You could have, a file pot. You can have your paintbrushes. You can have your tools for working with resin, and you can do it however you need. The important thing is, can I find what I need? And, without having to kind of search high and low for it. Because one thing is, you and I, we hobby, quite a lot, don't we? So, great, cool.
We try to.
Yeah, we do try to. And you spend your nights, a lot of nights painting. I'm spending a lot of time at my desk. Sometimes I'm not achieving a huge amount. And sometimes that can be because of the time I waste doing bits and pieces. Where actually you tidy that up, and all of a sudden, when you sit down to paint for an hour, you're painting for an hour, not for 45 minutes. And looking
not
for
spending
stuff
15 minutes trying to find the paints that you need, and
and
trying to find the right brushes and sort your area.
Yeah, and it's a major problem for a lot of hobbyists. Is finding the time. Society at the moment, there's a lot of people having to work longer hours, do 2 jobs, come home, family, all that stuff. There's a lot of time commitments in our lives. And it can be really difficult sometimes for some people just to find even that hour a day to model. So, maximizing your time. And I'm really bad. I'm really kind of sloppy and lazy with kind of organizing stuff. My desk at the moment looks awful, but I'm hoping, say when I get a permanent setup and I've got the ability to actually commit to a permanent setup, then I can start getting a little bit more organised in that. The one thing I am organised with is my paints, because that was a huge time sink for me, was finding the right paints. And I've done.
Now was this putting them all into the case?
GW case, yeah.
Yes.
I've done various methods over time. I've done the old GW method of painting, taking some of the paint from the pot, painting on the top, all that jazz, and having drawers nearby with various paints in. But yeah, I've organised them roughly how they are, pretty much how they are on the website. And they're all in a GW case right next to me, so I know, okay, all my bases are on the top layer, then it's 2 layers, then it's all my shades, and then it's, edge highlights, and that. So I know what I'm looking for. It's like, oh yeah, I need this layer paint. Cool, that's going to be in these 2. And that's going to be interesting with the airbrushing, because obviously that's going to be a completely different set of paints. I'm going to have to come up with a system for that, which I'm not sure about. There are companies out there who do very good paint racks. Nail varnish paint racks work as well, I believe, particularly for some of the dropper bottle style pots.
The one thing I've been thinking about of late is possibly getting some sort of paint rack system, because I'm pretty organised, because I keep all of mine in a drawer, so all my paints, not in any particular order, but then what I do is when I'm working on a project, I will select out, say, 10, 15 paints that I will be using.
Right, yeah.
And I keep those ones out on a little tray. Then obviously once I've finished a piece or whatever, they'll then go back in the drawer. And then when I start my next project, I pick the colours back out again. Sometimes that's the same colours coming out, but I just try and keep it to an alternate. I could order small selection.
Yeah.
So I'm not, because I know that if I'm painting, say, Corax, there will be 10 colours that I will be in and out of constantly, and a few colours I might dip into. But apart from that, they won't change. I won't try and use every single colour on a model. It will be very regimented to a set of colours mixed in a certain way. So I can hone that down when I start painting. I say, right, I need this, and this. And I keep those ones out and then keep everything away in a drawer.
Tell you the one place on models now, more often than not, where I'm looking for that extra paint is the new bases that are coming with various models that are scenic bases. Because
right, yeah.
So, say, all right, for example, I've got my latest warband here for Shadespire, and it's the Skaven. And okay, cool, I've decided to go for purple for the cloak. I'm going to need the fleshy tones for the flesh, silver for the armour. There's going to be a slightly lighter colour on that. And then, the base has got grey and brown. Oh, actually, no, there's a little bit of water here and there's some rats on the water. But that's not necessarily the same over all the other bases. So, the character itself is one set of, you choose your paints, and then you go down to the base and it's like, there's water here as well. Actually, I'm going to have to dig some greens out, but it's for one small bit. And so,
yeah, I know. Yeah,
my system what it does do is allow me to go, I'd never noticed that part of the model. I'm going to paint that. Okay, cool. I need, War Flesh. Brilliant. That'll be right there next to Caliban Green or whatever. So, yeah, that becomes quite good. And paint racks on the wall, every now and then as well, when I'm trying to decide on a colour scheme, it's good to have the options visibly in front of you. And the pots can help. It's something I will look at.
Yeah, I think the more organised you are, the more organised you are when you hobby. I think, if you have organised all your paints, it might have taken you a couple of hours to get them all sorted, but you will feel better when you're working on something that you know where everything is and you're not buying too much. I find that when I've been going through my paint collection, I've found several of the same colour where I've gone, I didn't think I owned that colour, where I've maybe bought it on whim and then later on thought I really need a new colour for this model and then bought two pots of it. So, organisation maybe stops all of that.
Yeah, and definitely utilising some kind of system like I've got with the Paint app to mark off what colours you need and you're out of works pretty well. Very rarely
I think that Paint app was a really good idea actually of GDub's.
Very rarely am I like, rubbish, I haven't got this paint. Sometimes it's like, this paint's dried up a bit, I will have to get a new one. That does happen, that's an issue, but that's cool. I don't think there's actually a huge amount. I think we're talking about space. A lot of people are very restricted on where they can hobby as well. You don't have a lot of choice about where you can put it in your home. If you do have that choice, light becomes a big issue, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would say for me, the light is probably one of the most important. The lighting is one of the most important things of when I hobby, I would say.
Yeah.
Without good light, I find it very hard to do many things at all.
No, and the better you want to paint, the more important the light is. So, as I say, when I was just getting that first army ready for the first event, it didn't matter that I was painting in my parents' front room with, a couple of lights, yellow, kind of normal, ceiling lights pointing down. That was fine. You can block colours out. That's not a problem, and you can paint on them. But the better you want to get and the better you want those colours to work, the light becomes more important. I've used various forms, from just a couple of clip-on bedside lamps, clip on the table, shine in, trying to get the right angle, along with having the main light on in the room. Fine, I painted like that for a while. I did notice a big difference in getting my first proper light, and I can't even remember the name of the one I've got now. You know it, surely. The one
you have at the moment, Daylight Company lamp.
Yeah, Daylight Company.
That is the tasked lamp.
Yes. So, an LED,
Excel.
but daylight as it says, lamp on an arm to be positioned where I need it, so I'm not contorting myself to try and, view what I'm trying to paint, or what was worse with the old one was move the model into the light, move it out of the light to paint it, move it back into the light to check you've done it right,
Yes, yeah. And the beauty of these lamps is that you can get them on a good arm, which means you can position it in that optimum position where you don't need to keep moving your model either in or out, or your head backwards and forwards to try and get an idea if you've got the right area or the right colour or whatever, anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely, and they adjust as well. And this wasn't cheap. I got it on sale. I can't remember how much it was now, probably £80-90, maybe a little bit less than that. But it was a good percentage off. Was money well spent. Now, it can sometimes be hard to put that kind of money into a lamp when you've got an army to get ready, and I completely understand that. And I've done the same thing myself, and I would never kind of tell anyone they're doing it wrong for not doing it. But if you want to improve on your painting, having something like this is really effective in taking you up the levels.
Oh, definitely. I think that the lamp can make such a difference for most people, when they look at their models under a proper daylight lamp, they suddenly look. I remember I had one out once and someone held their models and they went, "Oh wow, my models look really rubbish under that lamp." And it was a case of, well, no, what you're doing is, where you're painting under poor light, you're just assuming, oh, that'll be fine. But when you really get some good light on something, you can see every area, you can make sure you capture every bit of detail. It's so much easier to see the model. I know, it's like when you get older and you start, people start having to turn the light on to read a book or something like that. Whereas when you're younger, you can read it in, almost pitch black. The light helps you really focus on that model and get much better results. Even just paint with a good lamp, I think, can improve most people's painting. Just straight off the bat.
Yeah,
they'll
definitely
get better just by seeing the model better.
Yeah, and there are, so the one I've got, as I say, it's on a double arm. You can move it at various points. You can increase the brightness, lower the brightness, increase the amount of rings of LEDs that are on and everything like that. And you don't even need this lamp to make you better. There's a small, I wish I remembered to look it up, but there's a small one you can place on your desk, which has got an arm less than 30 centimeters long, which provides a lot of light. Two of them on a table can provide a lot of light. It's the kind of thing where, if you also travel a lot and you take hobby with you, it can be really good to shove in your bag and take with you. 99.9% of the hobby I'm going to do is going to be at this table. So this type of lamp is going to suit me fine. There was an old school of thought in Warhammer tournament painting that almost every event you play will be in a sports hall type arena in the UK. So you might as well paint under yellow light because no one's ever going to see it under daylight anyway. And for army painting, there's a certain truth in that, and that's cool. That's fine. Obviously, competition level, or if you want to just keep pushing yourself anyway, the better light, the better, as you say, you're able to see the details of what you're painting to make sure that you are applying the paint properly, and achieving all those details as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on that same line, obviously you've got the Task Lamp XL, and I've got by the same company, Daylight Company. I've got the Lumi, which is the new version of the Task Lamp XL. So they've updated the model, which is probably a good bonus. So if everyone's looking out there to getting a Task Lamp, or they're thinking, maybe they want to invest in one, a good time to start looking around for one, especially for the Task Lamp XLs, because as the stocks sort of, as they bring out the new version, obviously the old version will hopefully be discounted down. So if you're looking for a really good solid lamp, it's probably good to have a little look around on Amazon and a few places and have a look around for the Task Lamp XL, because you might find some good prices knocking around.
So what does your lamp do that this one doesn't?
It is just generally an update,
Sure.
of that model. So, I mean, it's a lot sleeker. It looks a lot nicer. I would say the arm has been better designed, that you can position the lamp better.
Okay, cool.
Especially, I don't know, where is your arm positioned on your, work surface? Is it at the side, or is it like right directly in front of you? So it's
Mine's
coming
to
over
the
the
side.
table.
So mine's on the side.
One thing I noticed with the new version is they've made it so that the lamp can go at 90 degrees a lot better.
Okay.
So if it's at the side, if you twist the lamp, it actually goes flush to the arm, where the old one the arm starts to get in the way of the lamp, and then you have to start jigging it about to try and get the lamp to go sort of sideways. So they've sort of improved that mechanism. They've made it ever so slightly brighter. Not that I would say you would really notice if you sort of upgraded from one to the other. They've simplified the button feature now, that it is just like a 2 brightness button, and it's just on and off, which I think, to be fair, the levels of LED and all the brightnesses, it's like everyone just turns it on to max and has everything on. So I don't think, I think getting rid of some of those would probably be sensible.
I think I've changed the brightness about 3 times in its life. And sometimes that was because I had a headache. So, but yeah.
I must admit, they are very, very bright. And, when I've ever used them, they are super bright, but that's what you're after.
Yeah, but it's also daylight bright. So it's not that yellow bright that you're getting from, household light bulbs.
Yes.
If you haven't painted under a daylight, and I think most people know about that now, but there are probably still some people out there doing it. It does make a big difference in your ability not just to see, but to be able to cope under the light as well, because you can
definitely.
You can strain under the yellow light a little bit.
Definitely.
That's cool.
The one weird thing, I know it's a really odd thing, but you spoke about travelling with a lamp.
Yeah.
This lamp I've taken now to 3 events I've gone to now. Right. So I took it to the Richard Gray event, I took it to Andy Wardle's event, and I took it to the Heresy Weekender. And each time, because the way it folds down now, it folds very flat.
Sure.
And I found it really easy to transport. So you literally fold the arm down, turn it sideways, and then turn the lamp head in, and it almost becomes like a very flat shape. So it's very easy to carry it. Whereas the old one always felt a bit as though everything was swinging about and you were going to knock something with it. Now, because it folds very flat, it makes it a lot easier to carry around. And I've taken it around a fair bit with me. So if you are thinking of travelling with it, it makes life a little bit easier. If it's always going to be bolted to a desk, and obviously that you probably wouldn't see that benefit. Yeah. But it's a very well designed lamp, and I think obviously as it's going to be the new version, obviously you will see more and more people with them. But the old one, I think, is still the steadfast staple. I mean, it's one thing to say is, the heavy metal team use the Task Lamp XL. When they judge Golden Demon, they do it under a Task Lamp XL. Oh, yeah. So if you're looking for the level in which the professionals go to, and also to say, if you want to you want to look at your stuff as if it was being judged, a Task Lamp XL is going to do that job for you, because that's how people look at it when they're actually scrutinizing a model. So that sort of says quite a lot about if you're trying to improve your painting. It does help.
Cool. Anything else about your painting area before we get into the final bits?
Not really. I mean, obviously I've got all sorts. Do you have any other weird and wonderful contraptions that you use for painting?
No. I mean, I've literally got my wet palette, my paint pots, my water pot out. I'm waiting for my new wet palette to turn up. Nothing too weird. I mean, my desk is full of mixer and place to put my iPad while I'm painting, and computer screen and everything else. But, nothing painting wise.
I've got a little magnifying glass that's on a stand.
Oh, you are that age though.
But I'm of that age, yeah. So that's probably one of my weird things in my setup. And other than that, a massive microphone boom that I sometimes use for my mounting a camera on as well. So I've sort of got all sorts of stuff going on. But yeah, mainly, if I had to pack my setup and make it mobile, as I have done recently, daylight lamp, painting palette, selection of paints, brushes, wet palette, and that's pretty much me good to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And then everything else is just, periphery. So if it's like, I could sit on any desk or any table, I could sit in any room. Nothing else really phases me. But as long as I've got a lamp, palettes, paints, I think I could paint anywhere.
The only other thing is seat.
Do you just have a normal office seat?
I do, actually, yeah. I tend to find I scrunch up over, get the old painter's back syndrome sometimes.
Yes.
I tend to move around a fair amount, so it's not as bad as some people have. Ideally, the problem is you want to be comfortable whilst painting. You also, again, need it to be under the light. You need everything in range of you. But if you can get something which is a little bit higher than most tables, because at the end of the day, most of these kind of desks and whatever are designed for, writing or working on a computer on. So they're designed so your hands rest nicely. Sometimes when you're painting, you just want to get that much closer to the model. And not everyone can hold the model up and do that. They want to be close to the table, resting their hands or whatever. So it might be worth looking at a seat which is slightly smaller than normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yep.
But
I've got just a standard sort of office meeting chair that's sort of very squeaky, as probably listeners have heard over the many podcasts that I've done. But I just have a very. It's not. I don't think it's particularly well designed for back support, and I think you're right. I think a lot of painters have a very bad posture when they paint. So, there's not, I don't think there's a chair out there that sort of really helps with that, but it's certainly something to think about is seated position maybe. Yeah. I know some people paint virtually on the floor, don't they? They'll take their seat right to the very bottom and they'll sit where their chin's almost on the table.
Yeah.
And I know some people that it's almost like they're on a bar stool, hovering over the desk. So,
yeah,
I suppose most people find where they're comfortable.
Yeah, it's finding where you're comfortable. If you are one of those people who has the really awkward positions, though, it's probably a good idea to remember to get up and have a walk round every few minutes.
Yes.
Because it does take its toll after a long session. And I know, your back problems can be attributed to there are lots of factors that contribute in that. If you're a small, skinny thing, then, you're going to be able to hold those, like, awkward leaning over positions a little bit better than if you're carrying extra weight as well. That's nature of the beast, isn't it? As a guy who's carrying a little bit of extra weight, it does tell, like gaming weekends, leaning over a table, your back feels it. So just trying to help yourself out here and there is quite good. But I think we kind of covered that. What we are going to do, though, is Neil's talked about his lamp. When did they come out, those lamps?
The Lumi?
The Lumi.
I think the Lumi came out about a month or maybe 2 months ago, I think it was.
So, we've actually got a bit of a prize to give away, haven't we?
We have indeed, yes.
Go on then.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So, obviously, speaking with the Daylight Company, we've secured a task lamp XL, so the version that Greg and I have used in the past, and we have got one of those to give away. Now, it is a UK spec lamp, so it'd probably be best if it was a UK winner because it's got a UK plug, etc. So, we're going to try and run a very simple competition, which is going to be based off Instagram. So, do you want to give the details to that, Greg?
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to put up a post on Instagram on the Imperial Truth Instagram page, which you can find at. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this through Neil's Instagram, because you know how much Neil likes to post his pictures on Instagram.
So, I do indeed.
So
you know that.
Absolutely. So we're going to do it through Neil's this time. And basically, Neil's going to post up a post, which will have somewhere in it talking about the lamp. And then all you have to do is like the post and then comment on it with, what's the term? Tagging a person, another person.
Tag a friend.
Yeah. And we're aware that this is a little bit spammy, and other places might do this. We're not going to keep doing this kind of thing. So we feel that we can do it once. And that's good. So yeah, Neil's, because the show doesn't necessarily have its own Instagram because essentially I'm running enough different social media that I've got my own Instagram, and we do put stuff up through, between Neil and I, we do post on Instagram on behalf of the show. So we're going that way about it. So what is your...
So I'll get a post up in the next few days. Literally go on there and like and tag a friend. Quite simple. If you haven't got an Instagram account, it's really easy to set them up. And if you've got a Facebook account, I do believe because Facebook owns Instagram, it's very easy to create your own Instagram off the back of your Facebook account.
Sure, yeah.
So it's I'm sure a lot of people might have a Facebook account and not an Instagram account, and it's very easy to sort of get that set up and just go on there, like and tag, and we will pick the winner in the next podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to search for at NeilPaints if you're not sure on how Instagram works. There's a little magnifying glass at NeilPaints, and that will come up with Neil's Instagram page, and you can go from there.
Definitely. So it should be good. I mean, obviously, I'm hoping that someone wins this that really needs it, and it's not just sort of someone who's already got 3 task lamps and loads of setup, but it'd be great to see it go to a good home and someone to get the benefits of a really good daylight lamp.
Yeah, so I had the quickest of looks on the interwebs in front of me, and you're looking at roughly £100 worth of lamp at the moment. That's not a bad price.
Yeah, so it's not bad. Not bad for a quick Instagram like and tag.
That's it, absolutely. And importantly, if you're not on Instagram, once you're there, you can see who Neil's following. You can see, you can search for hashtags, things like that. So, Horus Heresy, hashtag 30k, hashtag Warmongers, hashtag Games Workshop, Painting Warhammer is a good one. And you can then get involved in that community that are on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I love Instagram is it's all about photos, and you find that a lot of hobbyists are just taking photos of stuff they've done or battles they're playing, and it's very easy just to scroll through loads of photos and just see cool stuff. So many times I see really good conversions on Instagram or really good paint jobs, and it really gets you going, and you think, oh, that looks good, I might try that, or I might try that. So it's a really good resource if you just fancy a bit of a shot in the arm hobby wise.
Absolutely. Awesome. We'll leave that there then. And we'll come back after the break and talk to Michael about some Black Library goodness. Okay, well, we're joined by Michael once again. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks.
Excellent stuff. So what we're going to do is have a very brief look back at the weekend, and most of the information was disseminated, put out on the internet in various forms, and through various reasons and an illness, we couldn't get together to talk immediately afterwards. So we're just going to touch on a few bits from the weekender. I do want to touch on Black Library's presence there. What did you make of it?
Well, obviously it wasn't a Black Library event. It was Black Library being there as part of something bigger. And I thought in context of the overall event, I think Black Library's involvement was pretty good. I did focus quite a lot on those seminars and chatting to some of the authors, chatting to some of the staff. And I think, within the constraints they had, they did a pretty good job, but it obviously wasn't the same sort of experience as last year's BL Weekender.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. I would say, though, that the Heresy Weekender has had a stronger Black Library approach than this one. I was a little bit... There was seminars are there, a number of them you're going to expect. So, Last Sons of Prospero, Sons of the Emperor, Wolfsbane talking about the new book. Well, I kind of expected that, even though we had it at the Black Library Weekender. It felt a little bit light apart from that to me, or maybe not light's the right word, but maybe less, I don't know. It seemed like there could have been more, and not necessarily in how much of numbers of seminars or something like that, but it felt a little bit stifled. in
So
content?
I guess in comparison with the BL Weekender, quite a few of the seminars were a single author doing a bit of reading from their book and talking about stuff. That sounds really silly, but talking about what they've just put out. And so I guess from that respect, there were fewer of the sort of curated seminars. There were a couple, like you said, the Sons of the Emperor and the Siege of Terror. I certainly went to 3 that was Chris, right, Guy Haley and Josh Reynolds, 2 of which did a reading, and they were essentially talking through their latest or upcoming releases. Now I really enjoyed those, but I can see that if you decided to give those a miss, or if that's not the sort of thing you're after, there was less of the loads of people round the sofa spitting ideas out, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and maybe that's a new way forwards for this weekender. Obviously with the Black Library weekender coming back, that's going to take up that role a great deal more. But when I also look at where Black Library were positioned selling stuff, whether or not it felt distinctly separate from the Forge World sales area. Yeah.
Now, in advance, I was a little bit nervous about the whole thing. We may or may not come to the overall sort of organisation of the event, but there was very little information given in advance. The BL Weekender last year, it was certainly weeks in advance that we had loads of really useful information. And the whole thing was organised beautifully. This one, there was very little info. And then when the map arrived, I thought, oh, hang on a minute. So the sales stand is in a corridor, and the author signing table is in a sort of weird little area that normally filled with about 3 tables. And it definitely felt in advance like it felt to me like an afterthought, which I thought was a shame. That it's like, well, we have to include Black Library so they can have these little bits tucked out of the way. Now, I think they did a good job with what they were given. In fact, the signing station, that was more space than I'd remembered. And the sales stand I thought was quite nice in the end. The fact that you were so regularly walking past it, there was a really good footfall. But it did feel still, not as bad as I thought, but it did still feel a little bit like tacked on. And I don't think that's a criticism of Black Library at all. I think that's just the wider organisation of the event.
Yeah, and I've heard different stories about why that is, and I honestly can't tell you whether they're true or not. So I'm not going to repeat any of them because that way lies whole flipping Reddit threads, and it could very well be a very simple reasoning of they thought this would work. I don't know, but you're right. I felt as well that it felt a bit separate, added on, if you will. And you're certainly right. We talked last show, communication about the event was minimal. There was just, we didn't find out what the seminars were till quite late. We didn't find out what was going on. Look, the fact that Dan was going to be there signing on Friday night was really good, but we didn't know. It's a bit like, people might have made that. When Dan's only going to be available on a Friday night, this is Dan, he's bringing out, a book that's long awaited. Maybe that could have been information. Maybe it wasn't finalised till late, so maybe it couldn't have been. We don't know. But when added on to all the other bits where the information was a bit lacking, it makes you wonder. That's all.
It does. My gut feeling, and I didn't talk to anyone about this, it's pure speculation, is that the difference is that the BL Weekender was organised by Black Library, so they took complete ownership of it. It was something that they had absolute buy-in. They had that. They were really responsible for it, and they did a damn good job. This one, there were far fewer BL staff, so I get the impression that it was not organised. Their involvement was not organised to the same extent. So I suspect it was an event organised by other people that they were just asked to come and do certain things, which is totally fine. You can, like you said, it does require a lot of work to set one of these up. So maybe they're already working on, maybe whoever looks after events at BL is already working on this year's BL Weekender. And if that's the case, that gets my wholehearted blessing. Like, make that really good, because I think, putting selfish reasons to one side, I'm very much focused on the BL stuff at the Heresy Weekender, but I think I'm in the minority. So most people are more interested in the gaming side and the Forge World side. So focus on that. That's fine. That's what that event should be. The BL one can be where it focuses on that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was run by the events team, I believe. There's certainly events team people there behind the thing. And at the Black Library Weekender, it's only Black Library. That is a big difference. Here we've got specialist games, we've got the Forge World main, in inverted commas, and Black Library, and, other little bits and pieces going on as well. So it is much more, to think about. There are more people to talk to. And as soon as there are more people to talk to, there's chances of communication issues and things like that as well. So it could be a whole plethora of things. Just next year, hopefully it just feels a little bit more integrated. And it might just be down to, we've got to say, this venue isn't big. So there are only so much they can do, but Black Library will probably be in the same place next year. That's not necessarily an issue, if the rest of the event feels more integrated. So, it wasn't a major faux pas or anything like that. It's important to stress, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that next year's going to be really interesting because
hell yeah,
it feels like the inclusion of Necromunda was good timing because Necro's out and what have you, but also a bit of a test in the water of whether a Forge World Weekender would work.
Yeah.
Where you have multiple things. Now, I didn't engage as much with the Forge World side of things, so I'm not in a position to comment on that well. If they do that, if they go down the route of a Forge World Weekender, cool. I would almost say, if it's not a Heresy Weekender specifically, if it's Forge World in its various incarnations, then arguably it doesn't need a bigger Black Library involvement.
Yeah.
And it's a sort of event that people like me, who are primarily interested in the books, are maybe going to be less inclined to go to, just naturally.
Sure.
And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that's going to be a negative.
I will say, I'm pretty sure I heard Tony say that the idea would be to go back to a Heresy Weekender.
That's interesting.
I think, and I'm trying to remember exactly where I heard it, because obviously this is, man saying stuff on the internet. At the end of the day, and people can quite in their rights not to believe that I think I heard that. And I think this year might have been a stopgap for a year where so much has gone on and they've had issues. And the intention is to return to a Heresy Weekender. Because the problem with opening it up to a Forge World Weekender is all of a sudden you've got groups of people who have no connection to the other bits. So having Lord of the Rings, having Necromunda, Blood Bowl, Adeptus Titanicus will be out by then, and then Heresy and 40k. It'll be harder to sell those tickets. But there we go. That's a different issue. Awesome. So we're just going to pick out a couple of things. What were the bigger takeaways from you from the Black Library aspect?
Well, from a Heresy perspective, I think I did go to the two seminars with Chris Raitt and with Guy Haley talking about the Jagatai Khan Primarch's book and Wolfsbane, which are both really interesting, and I love listening to those guys read. But there was not a lot there of really juicy, in-depth stuff about stuff that's coming up, other than the specifics of their books. I thought the bigger areas of interest really came from those wider ranging seminars. The Sons of the Primarch one, Sons of the Emperor one, was interesting, but I think the Siege of Terror had the most sort of juicy, interesting little bits of information for what's coming up. So, obviously there's nothing concrete, but just little things around, a couple of reveals of things that we might see that we're going to see that we might not have been aware of. And little bits of information to give us a feel for the approach they're thinking of taking. I think that was that was valuable, and that was interesting, and I think I appreciated Nick Kime, who's the compere, who did a really great job, and what I really liked was at the beginning of that seminar he said, look guys, there's going to be a bunch of stuff that we just can't talk about, so you're just going to have to bear with us. I think that honesty and his then willingness to go, I said those things, that's one of them, when someone asked a question that was too specific, to steer the conversation to things they could talk about, I thought that worked really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick's does that job quite well as well. And then his position, because I think he's in charge of like overseeing the heresy now in that role.
That would make sense, because I think he's the managing editor.
Yeah.
So he manages the rest of the editors, and he's certainly got a lot of experience in that respect.
Yeah, and I haven't heard that for definite, but Laurie talked about having meetings with Nick to plan out certain stuff, and then his role he's taken on. So yeah, absolutely, combined with his role in the company as well, and he knows what they're talking about, and we are. I'm not saying we're lucky because those people get to the positions they are in because they are those people, but, John French, Chris Ray, they know what they're talking about. They understand this universe. It was a big shame not to have Aaron there as well, but,
it was.
He does as well. These people really know what they're talking about. So when you get them on the stage and you're asking questions that are pertinent, that are, that are looking into a part we don't know about, they can run with it, which is good.
No, for sure. Well, if you want to cover a few of the little bits of the details, so I did a post on Track of Words, so you can always go and check that out because I'm going to forget half of what I talked about. But trying to think through from the beginning, I thought one of the really interesting things, someone asked a question about the fall of the Death Guard, and it was quite firmly stated. Obviously, take all of this with a pinch of salt, but it was quite firmly stated that happens pre-Siege of Terror, and that would be, I think they said the penultimate book before the Siege of Terror starts would cover the fall of the Death Guard. So that in itself is interesting. No confirmation of who's writing it. My guess would be maybe Jim Swallow, but that's a pure speculative guess. But I think there's a lot of people looking forward to that. And if we're at book 50, is that right? 50 with Wolfsbane? No, 49 with Wolfsbane. So 50 with presumably Slaves of Darkness. No, I don't think there's going to be that many more now before the siege starts. Maybe a few.
Well, yeah, and they came out and said there's definitely going to be over 60.
But the other interesting thing I thought was that there were conversations about how BL are going to handle the Siege of Terror, and I've heard various unconfirmed sort of rumours and what have you, that it might be treated as like a mini series within the Heresy. Now, I don't know if that means a different design or anything like that. I think probably not, but almost the Siege of the Terror being like its own thing within the Heresy. And it was, again, while it wasn't confirmed, it was mentioned that there would be at least, or it was mentioned that a certain something, which I'll come to in a minute, would be in the 6th book of the Siege of Terror. So that suggests that it's going to be quite a few, potentially as its own little mini-series, taking us past 60. Like, we're starting to build up the tiny little hints of a picture of what this is going to be. So that particular revelation was that one of the moments, one of the events during the Siege of Terror that I certainly didn't know about was the Khan taking on Fulgrim, which is cool. We all like a Primarch fight. And Nick mentioned that would be in the 6th book of it. So I can't imagine that's going to be in the final moments just before the Emperor teleports up to the Vengeful Spirit. Maybe it will. But I think that means there's going to be, 6 or 7 or more novels covering the Siege of Terror. Yeah,
it also depends where they define the Siege of Terror. So, as you said, the idea is for the penultimate book before that point being the Fall of the Death Guard, which happens in the warp on the way to Terror. We know that you've got to have some form of description of a space battle to get there. Luna's still there as an issue. Mars potentially has something to throw up. So yeah, there's potentially more than one book, 2 books before we actually start the actual siege itself, potentially.
Yeah, now my gut feeling is that the Siege of Terror will be considered to have started when Horus and co. reach the Sol system.
Yes,
so the
absolutely.
big space battles and all that sort of stuff will be part of the siege. But again, that's pure speculation.
Yeah. But with everything that's going on, we know, this mention of this duel between the Khan and Fulgrim is awesome. That's cool. We know the Khan rode forth. He was pretty active in his defense of the siege. So that doesn't really give us any help on trying to time that within the schedule.
No.
And there is a lot to write about it when everyone talks about Sanguinius at the moment. You hear Aaron and people like that saying he did everything in the siege. He was everywhere. So you could almost imagine him getting his, a book's worth of stuff just on what he was doing. Not necessarily in one novel, maybe across multiple novels, but certainly being a book's worth of stuff just on him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's been pretty much confirmed that I don't quite know how anyone thought this would happen, but it's not going to be a book about the Blood Angels and a book about the Sons of Horus. They're going to be intermingled, so people will get to write lots of different things. Each book will contain a wide, one assumes, range of topics and characters and events, and certainly to me that makes complete sense. Yeah,
absolutely. Was there anything else about Guy? Was it Guy talking about, or Gav? Sorry, Gav talking about a book with Iron Warriors, Malkador?
Yes. Now I did make a note of what Gav said. Gav talked about it, including Iron Warriors, Malkador, Valdor, and the Custodes, and following on from the Master of Mankind. So in looking at the sort of aftermath of the Webway War, and he mentioned that it might include some of the human Alpha Legion operatives that we saw in Praetorian of Dawn. Cool. So that's got a lot of different sort of characters and archetypes in there already.
That could be really interesting.
I think it was someone. In fact, I think it was Alec from Heresy Online forums asked a question about what's the release schedule going to be like? Because he raised the valid question of I think most of us, barring particularly slow readers, don't want there to be like a 6-month, 9-month gap between novels during the Siege of Terror, because I know I would find that you're really ramping up. It's getting so close. Don't make me wait so long. And while Nick wouldn't be drawn on the release schedule, he said it wouldn't be a 6-month wait. And he pointed out that it also won't be a 5-month wait. He was trying to carefully say they will come out at relatively regular intervals, with the balance presumably being not making fast readers wait too long, but also not rushing it so that slower readers can't keep up and get everything spoiled for them and that sort of thing, which I thought was really interesting. And it sounds like there are conversations going on about not just the narrative, not just how to wrap everything up, but the sort of logistical elements of how to deliver the end of the biggest series ever.
Yeah, I think so. GW, when they killed the Old World, and actually in the build-up to 8th edition 40k, when they released the End Times books and then the Gathering Storm, they were a 3-month period between those. And I know they're not novels, but that was books that were expected to be read before the next one came out, but actually were done in a period of time. So something like that could work. They've done it, albeit, as I say, with gaming material, but there was quite a lot of story in that.
And for the End Times, there was gaming material and fiction. Yeah,
and they came out at the same time, didn't they?
Yeah.
So and there were more books coming out within that as well. So I think we could potentially look at that as a sort of a template without confirming anything at all.
Yeah, I would be surprised to see a Siege of Terror book come out once a month.
Yeah,
I think crazy. Once every 2 or 3 months, probably. Yeah. I mean, I would love it to be once a month personally. If it can't be once a month, which it probably won't, every couple of months, getting something, because there'll be other things going on around. Yeah. Another thing that I can't quite remember the details, but another thing that was mentioned was this idea of the Siege of Terror really is about the stuff happening in the Sol system. Now, the rest of the war doesn't stop while Horus and the Emperor are having a big fight. So there are other things going on in the rest of the galaxy. They're not going to be covered in the Siege of Terra novels. But that's not to say there won't be novellas and short stories and audio dramas covering those. So I'd be surprised if we don't get other non-main range novel releases over that same period.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, even if we don't, it's been talked about a long time. It's never been confirmed, but all the authors have talked about it. Talked to Dan, he was talking about it, about the heresy as a setting as well. So there is, most probably going to be opportunity to go back and look at stories which need finishing off, or new ones that could have been told and things like that as well. Because I think they've pretty much confirmed now that the heresy ends when the Emperor's in turn into the Golden Throne.
Yep.
So that is where they're calling heresy. You have to pick a point, and it's not easy to pick a point, but that's the point at which, all hope kind of disappears, really.
Yeah, and to be fair, the Horus heresy, Horus is dead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's as good an arbitrary point as any. I'm pretty sure it was covered again in that seminar of basically saying, look, we're not going to tell you it's going to happen, this idea of the heresy being a setting, because we're not really thinking that far ahead, like concretely thinking, but it's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
That was the sense, I'm massively paraphrasing, but that was the sense that I got out of that seminar.
Yeah, and every time authors talk about it, they seem excited. So, and that's a good, strong indication that, they want to do more. Which, if they didn't want to do anything, then it almost might not matter whether Black Library did or not. So, yeah, there's an aspect there, and that's cool, and it's good, and can't wait for really, we don't even know how far off this we are yet, and then how long it will go on for. I think looking at it as a mini series in its own right is almost natural. I think if they change the format of the books or anything like that, or the branding, it would ruin many people's minds, and mine included, actually.
Me too.
I'd be pretty peeved if my hardback suddenly, my Horus Heresy hardback suddenly changed whilst I was still in the Horus Heresy. Once they finished the Horus Heresy, with that point, I don't mind as much, but at least let us get to the end. It would be awful otherwise. So.
But if you look at the changes that have gone on in formats and stuff in Black Library over the years, and then look at the fact that the heresy, the release schedule's been a bit up and down, and we're still waiting for quite a lot of the mass markets, but they're still coming out. Like the theme, the visual identity and visual language of the heresy has not changed. I think BL are very aware. Guilty as though they definitely are in other series of messing things up. They, from a design visual perspective, I don't think they will with the heresy. But what you could see is, I don't know if you've noticed this, Black Library are a weird publisher for colons. So many books come out. Lucius, the Faultless Blade. Yeah. Fabius Bile, Primogenitor. Ahriman, Exile. Like, it's just a thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if we got the Siege of Terror, blah, Dave, whatever. You know what I mean.
Yeah, that could work. The Horus Heresy, the Siege of Terror, as you say, the whatever gate or something like that. Yeah, that could work, and fit into that without breaking what's already there. Because when you've got 60 books already sat on your shelf, the last thing you want is the last 8 to be different.
Can you imagine? Oh, such rage.
Such rage. The internet would explode.
Yeah.
But it's all good. Yeah. So there was enough coming out of that seminar to keep people most entertained.
Yeah, I think so. It wasn't groundbreaking and revelatory, but I defy anyone to genuinely expect it to have been.
Yeah.
Because we're not at the right point for that. And if they gave away loads of stuff that's going to happen, actually, I think I'd have been disappointed. I don't want to know. I want to read the books. So for me, it gave me everything I wanted. It was engaging. There were some remarkably, surprisingly good questions from the audience. Nick did a grand job of controlling the whole thing. So I actually think, it didn't give us anything mega concrete, but it was very interesting.
Excellent stuff. Should we move on and have a look at the Sons of the Emperor collection?
Yeah, let's.
So this was I'm trying to remember now because I'm getting confused between event onlys and things like that. This was an event only book, so it's available at Warhammer World.
I'm a bit puzzled by this one because it's not been made massively clear. The impression I get is that it is a, in inverted commas, events only, and there has been a limited number printed, which means they sold it at the Weekender. I am told it is on sale at the Warhammer World Black Library store, although I haven't been back. And if there are any copies available, it will be taken to the next event, which the next big one I assume is May Warhammer Fest.
Yeah.
So I think it is limited edition in as much as they're not going to keep reprinting it or not going to reprint it. It's that sort of event only in inverted commas, but I don't feel like it's been made mega clear.
No, it's not numbered. There's no limited run number in there.
No, it's not. It's not beautifully made and designed and stuff like what we think of as limited editions tending to be. It is, if anyone hasn't seen a copy, it is more or less printed to the same design as the standard editions of the Primarch's hardbacks. I'll come to that more or less in a minute. Which means there is no limited edition beautiful box set, what have you. So when... Yet. So as it stands, if it doesn't receive that treatment, there will be 18 beautiful books and at least one very nice, but not same standard beautiful. Fine by me personally, because I'm not collecting the limited editions. Yeah. I think I would be miffed, trying to be polite, if I were collecting them and I had essentially invested in advance £800 in a beautiful set of books, and there'd be a 19th that I didn't expect that doesn't look the same. But that's like, take it or leave it. You can't please everyone with that sort of thing. I think that someone did point out online that I think in their words, it doesn't even match the standard editions. It does. It's the same format. There's some tiny little things, like the lettering is matte gold, like yellowy gold, rather than the shining gold leaf sort of thing on the spine. Like, to all extents and purposes, it does match. It doesn't look exactly the same, but what it does do, in my eyes, is actually separate it as a separate thing that it goes side by side, but isn't necessarily quite so embedded within the series. I think I have it sat next to the rest of them, and it looks great.
Yeah, that's cool. And as I say, if you get 18 of one type, and they do a handful of these in the Dove type, because as we said, we're talking about the audios that were in the Advent. If they're not made into a short story format, then that's going to upset it anyway. So having your the non-18 primary books being slightly different is not as much of an issue, because they do represent something slightly different.
Yeah.
So
now, what I think will have to happen is for these stories to receive a general release.
Yeah.
That to my knowledge, that Black Library don't do exclusive short stories that remain exclusive forever. So just today, as we're recording this, an old school Warhammer, so it's been billed as Warhammer Chronicles, short story by C.L. Werner, has been released today. Bloodwalker, I think it's called. Which, I had to do some digging, was originally published in the 2012 Weekender anthology, one of them. And so it's taken 5.5 years for that to come out to a general release. But it has done. I genuinely think everything will do. And when it's something like the Primarchs, which is part of the Heresy, they will get a standard release.
Yeah.
What I don't think people should assume is that Sons of the Emperor will get a wider release. It might. They might just reprint this in a year's time, but it might not.
Yeah.
I don't think we should make that assumption, and I don't think people should necessarily wait with bated breath for this exact book to come out for everyone. I think the stories will come out and become available. I think it would be great if Sons of the Emperor does, but if it doesn't, I think they'll still arrive in one form or another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no... At the end of the day, these books are their product, and why would you not sell your product to more people if you can? But as you say, the format might vary.
I definitely think they will at least get digital-only releases as individual short stories.
Yes.
I think because the Primarchs is a little bit different, and you can debate whether or not each Primarch's story should be a Primarch's one or a Heresy one. So, we can debate that till we're blue in the face. It is not the mainline Horus Heresy. So this idea of everything in every format eventually might apply to them, but might not. And I wouldn't want to put money on it. So those 3 short audios, these short stories, I hope they are released in as many formats as possible, at least the short stories, to reach as many people as possible. I wouldn't want to put money on them all getting physical releases then.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Should we take a look at the stories?
Yeah, I think what we've done, we've talked a lot about the concept without actually what the hell this is. So if you're not familiar, if you've been spending the last 10 minutes going, what are they talking about? It is an anthology of 8 Primarch short stories from some big names. Not themed. It's not like, I'm trying to think of an old, not a Visions of Heresy style, not Visions of Heresy, Tales of Heresy one, where they're all sort of loosely themed together. It is 8 standalone stories.
Yeah.
Now, Primarch stories, they feature the Primarchs in varying ways and to varying degrees.
Yes.
I personally think it's a damn good collection. I think there's a load of really interesting stories in here, and enjoyably different. I think there's a nice level of variation in there. How do you want to do it? Do you want to go through them one at a time and have a quick...
Why not?
So if we do them in the order in which they are in the book, so I'm reading them from the back. So the first one is by John French, and it's called The Passing of Angels, and it's a Sanguinius short story. So this is pre-heresy, so this is Great Crusade era, and it's Sanguinius unleashing the Destroyer host on a world which resists compliance in quite a violent way.
Yes.
I think that's safe to say. They are quite short stories, so I don't want to say too much about them, because if someone's bought it, not read it, or when they do come out, I don't want to spoil anything. I think that gives a flavour.
We talked last episode about, to do with Malevolence, about the Blood Angels and what they're doing with the Legion. And we made note of the Destroyer Legion in that. Okay. And this book very much follows the talk we had there about the fact that the Destroyer Legion, by its very nature, is not, it's not really synonymous with the Blood Angels, more than even the Ultramarines, where we think the Destroyer Legion is pushed to the side. And it very much deals with Sanguinius's, kind of how he, it brings those two together to show how they do work.
Yeah, I think it does that in a really, really clever way, in typical John French fashion, by addressing that and addressing the inherent contradiction, that sort of cognitive dissonance of Sanguinius is this angelic figure. He is an angel, but he has wings. He's touched by the warp. Anyone else had wings, you'd call him a mutant. You'd kill him. So that brilliant contradiction at the heart of Sanguinius. Again, I don't want to say too much, but it sort of tackles that, and it's the idea of this legion who are artists, effectively.
Yeah.
Also employ, when they need to, the destroyers who rad weapons and all this horrible way of making war. That's just not what you see the Blood Angels is doing. No. And again, so that idea of contradiction I think the two tie in really nicely together. It's classic John French, so it's not a straightforward, obvious, easy read, but it's beautifully done.
Yeah, it's worth every moment. A really strong opening as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And seeing Sanguinius in a couple of different situations, yeah, very interesting.
Absolutely.
That is followed by The Abyssal Edge by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, which, now, John tackling Sanguinius, it's worth pointing out that some of these, like John, are authors tackling a Primarch or a Legion that they're not very well known for.
Yeah.
Aaron's one, Nick's one, for example, are the other way around. So you think Dembski-Bowden, you think Night Lords a lot of the time, and this is a Night Lord story. Although Conrad Kurz is not the only Primarch in it, but this is one where it's categorically not from the perspective of a Primarch. It's a human story looking at the legions and the Primarchs from a human perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the idea is that it's essentially sort of an archivist. He's an ex fighter pilot, effectively, who has been grievously wounded in an accident and desk bound. He's now thrown himself into his work as an archivist, and he finds a report from a certain Thousand Sun who will be familiar to anyone from, who's read Aaron's other work, whose report on the nature of the relationship between Kurz and Magnus during a particular compliance mission is not exactly positive. So this archivist, he feels he can't just sweep under the carpet, so he has to go and investigate. And probably not the best decision, because that leads him into the orbit of First Captain Sevatar. And you generally assume that's not going to go very well.
Yeah, I like this story. It pulls at the veneer of even the Great Crusade to show us, the reader, that everything is not always as it seems. To show us again that we can't always rely on the stories we're being told. You know, PR is as big a thing in the 41st, 31st millennium as it is now. It's an important tool for rallying people to your cause, for making people fight for you, or just for papering over cracks. Anything it can be useful. It's a really cool story. And then Sevatar being Sevatar.
Yeah. He's deeply cool. It's the sort of thing that you expect Aaron to write. But there's a lot of depth to it, actually, the more you think about it. And it's an interesting perspective on the Night Lords, because this guy, it's not overt, but it's implied and it's implicit that this guy is a member of the Night Lord's fleet. So he knows who he's fighting with. He is complicit in that. He understands it. But even then, when he comes face to face with Sevatar, and with seeing Kurz's approach, he doesn't flatter.
No.
With that. It's really nicely done. But that idea of an unreliable narrator, effectively what you're getting at, we'll come back to that with the story a bit later. Because the heresy, if you're not already familiar with the concept of an unreliable narrator, go look it up. The heresy is all about that.
Yes.
The 41st millennium, we know that people in 40k don't know what happened to the heresy. All they see is that propaganda style thing. But while the heresy series and the Primarchs are drawing the curtain back, it's still I read it all personally as coming from an unreliable narrator. Yeah. So you can see so many different perspectives in these things. And I certainly think with these stories, especially the ones which are not written from a first person perspective, taking all of that stuff with not quite a pinch of salt, but with an awareness that it's one perspective and only one perspective. That's valuable.
Yeah, it's a truth. It's very good. Yes. Okay. Mercy of the Dragon by Nick Kime. So we've got part of the story is the Emperor on Nocturne talking to Vulcan as this Outlander character, and then we cut to action on a planet where we see Vulcan's first foray, and he's being watched. So
Yeah, by the Emperor and by Ferrus Manus,
Yes.
which I think is really interesting.
yeah, absolutely.
This one's an interesting one. If you, I think Nick is a contentious author in the Heresy, and I don't think he always gets a fair rub. So if you don't like how Nick handles the salamanders, this is unlikely to change your opinion, because it's not exactly the same sort of style, but it's Nick's approach. It takes that sort of semi-mythical viewpoint perspective. So it's almost abstractions. So this idea that Vulcan is referred to through quite a lot of it as the dragon.
Yeah.
So he chooses to write in that way. And not everyone likes that. That's fine. I thought this was fascinating. While it's probably not one of my favourites in the series, and I've certainly seen a criticism that I think is probably fair, that it's perhaps a touch heavy-handed in its themes, the overarching thing it's trying to get across. What it does really well is show a really early stage of the Primarchs. So you're seeing Ferrus as he sees himself as the senior, or one of the senior Primarchs. He's observing Vulcan. And he's quite sort of critical of him, at least at first. And it's the combination of his viewpoint, where he gradually works out what's going on and why the Emperor is treating Vulcan in a certain way, ties in nicely with Vulcan working out what his place is when he's having that conversation with the Emperor. Because basically it's the Emperor trying to convince him to join a Great Crusade. And that itself is quite a juicy little morsel of, wow, what if one of the Primarchs actually said no?
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah.
So that's quite a cool concept to get in there.
And Vulcan was definitely the right person for this story. This story is all about, what we know about Vulcan is humanity, for want of a better word. And I think possibly right in the fact that it's not the subtlest of stories, but in some ways I think that works really well.
Yeah, because I think you have to look at the way he's approaching it. It is like a sort of a saga almost, and they're not known for narrative subtlety. That's not the point of that sort of story. And there's a ton of really interesting stuff going on in there. I did also see a comment that it would have been cool to have seen a bit more. So basically, there's some loose exploration of the other culture that Vulcan is essentially fighting against.
Yeah.
And I think, I can't remember who said that, it's pretty much spot on. I would have liked to have seen more of them. There was some quite interesting stuff.
Yes.
This sort of weird, primitive, but not primitive culture at the same time, and some creepy blood magic and that sort of stuff. A bit like how Gav tackled Lorgar with a story that really didn't feel like there were no Space Marines in it. It felt a little bit different, a little bit left field. This, I thought, tapped into a touch of that sort of sensation.
I'm trying to remember. We know the Vulcan book is going to be about him trying to reconcile two parts of his Legion together.
Yep.
But do we know where it's taking place?
I can't think off the top of my head. I've only seen the blurb.
So there's potential that it does, play off something else. It might not, but 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 you're right. They were a really interesting adversary to have, and they could be revisited. You never know. I like that. Shadows of the Past. So the Dark Apostle Kaltar R is trying to raise a monument for his Primarch when things start to go awry.
Yeah, I love this one. Now, full disclosure, I read the blurb on the back, and it basically says, it mentions Lorgar, obviously, and I read it as being Lorgar was who was after them.
Right.
And I was reading it going, what? I don't really understand this. And then when it was revealed, I went, this makes way more sense. So I got myself in a bit of a muddle, but I absolutely loved this one. And I think the reason why I enjoyed it so much, I think Gav has a really good grasp on the word bearers, actually. And I think this was I liked that it was an unspecified point after the heresy.
Yes.
This is definitely post-heresy, but it's not clear where. And I like a bit of ambiguity. But what I really liked was that it was just a classic role reversal. So you're used to seeing loyalist Space Marines, or just loyalist characters of any sort, being the ones who are chased around by a demon.
Yeah.
And the creepy thing blurring out the shadows and eating them and, melting them and all that sort of stuff. That's what you're used to seeing. And this was just the exact other way around. So it's the word bearers getting attacked by something decidedly creepy that can do some really scary things. And so that, they're essentially in the midst of the building of this incredible monument when, people start disappearing and then it escalates very rapidly.
Yes.
Like really rapidly. I think it could probably have hung a much bigger story on this. You could have turned it into something bigger if there'd been chance. And I don't think that's not a criticism, but purely that it's a cool enough story. And, I think it works, but it could have worked as a novella, say.
Yeah, but I mean, again, there's potential to explore this kind of story down the line. Now we've broken kind of when we get to the end of the heresy, there's going to be that void, and they're going to fill it in certain ways, but there's no reason. People like Primarch stories, so there's no reason to fill the gaps in between. That.
Like Aaron's story, this is categorically not from the perspective of a Primarch, and a Primarch is in it. There's a real reveal in this that you may get. People may have read it and gone, oh yeah, I saw it come in. I don't know. But I don't want to spoil it because it's cool. But there is a Primarch in it, Lorgar, obviously. What I thought was really cool about this was that it's still a Primarch story, because what it's doing is it's shedding a light on what sort of happened to them, what they became post-heresy. And we haven't really seen any of that in that. It's still immediate post-heresy. It's not, it can't be that long. And it's also implied that it's actually possibly the event that sets Lorgar on the path where he basically storms away, shuts the door, and hides for 10,000 years. Now, I don't read it as categorically that's what happened, but it's implied that this might be what caused that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So we know that Lorgar has been hiding away. That's not the right term, but he's been locked away, contemplating the mysteries of the universe for a very long time on Sicarius. Sicarus.
Yeah, whichever.
However you pronounce it. So certainly there's a suggestion that this might explain a little bit of why he did that, but it's cool. There's a load of really good stuff in this. And like I said, I like that role reversal.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to take us through The Emperor's Architect by Guy Haley?
Yeah, so now I thought this was really interesting. So obviously we've got Aaron and Nick talking about characters that they are familiar with, but Guy, this is a quite a direct connection with his Primarch's book. Which is not quite the same as any of the rest of them. And I quite like that there's at least one which does sort of dovetail. It's not an extension, but if you have read Perturabo the Hammer of Olympia, you'll know that it begins where Angel Exterminatus leaves Perturabo, or not leaves, but where it talks about him, where he's climbing these cliffs in Olympia, and he has no recollection of what happened before that. So we know that he must have landed and then stuff happened and he awoke, whatever, climbing the cliffs, and then he's taken to, I forget, Lokos, however you say the name of the city. So this story is essentially, part, brief exploration of what actually happened. So as he crashed and then the very young Perturabo is pottering around. But that's sort of shown as a reflection of, a Great Crusade era story of marital discord.
Yes.
So basically there's two, I suppose you'd call them remembrances. I don't quite know if that's, well, I think they were described as that.
They are described, yeah.
They've been tasked with seeking out the Primarchs and writing the definitive books of each Primarch's life story. And I think it says that Perturabo is something like the 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
They've not had a particularly good time of it. It's a married couple, and the lady is still very much bought into the idea of what she's doing, and she's become a little bit swayed by the imperial Electitio Divinitatis.
Yeah.
The guy is cynical. He's fed up. He's had enough. He doesn't get on with his wife anymore. He has no truck with faith. He's all about the imperial truth, and he does not like the Primarchs. He does not respect them. He is not a fan of them. No. So they reach Olympia, and they're going about their business trying to get hold of Perturabo, who's not there. So they go around visiting the sites of his youth, and then that's interspersed with the story of what the young Perturabo got up to. And it's great. It's classic Guy Haley, just taking a really interesting look at something. It's really character driven. I think a story of a marriage on the rocks. I think that's got to be the first in the Heresy.
and he's done it well in that there are very few humans who can reach the view that the male does in this thing. You have to have been that close to see what he's seeing to fight back against the propaganda machine and the imperial truth and what's portrayed. And his wife then being a follower of the Lectitio Divinitatis and all that, rubbing him up as well to the point where they have got this. He's seeing, whether correctly or not, he's seeing through what he believes is a veneer over the whole crusade almost.
Yeah, and the really juicy part is that they're the ones tasked with writing the histories. Yeah. And they both understand, although they have different perspectives on it, that their job is not, whether they want it to or otherwise, the job is not actually to tell the truth. I mean, he doesn't like it. She's okay with this. The job is to tell the palatable truth to the masses. And that's just such a great concept. It's done really well. The pair of them are intriguing characters right from the off, and I would have been happy with a story just about them. But wrapping in the early Perturabo, and once again, it does not portray him in a good light. It is not going to make you like him if you don't already.
I don't even think that many people who like him really like him.
No, I don't think they do. But it's fascinating, and it's actually a really interesting idea of this character who essentially has all his knowledge on tap, that he's just gradually tapping into, but he doesn't have empathy. And at one point, someone says, "Oh, you're here to protect us." And he thinks about it and he says, "Yes, that's my job, to protect you and improve you."
Yes.
Like, right there. He has no empathy. He has no modesty. He just says it as it is. But it's so arrogant and it's so classic Perturabo. It's brilliant.
Definitely. Okay, Prince of Blood by Laurie, L.J. Goulding, as he's known here. So we talked to Laurie on Fanatic. We had Dave and Laurie on. I was talking to Laurie a little bit about this story beforehand. And he was asked, "You got any ideas for stories?" And he'd said, "Well, I've got this story, but it doesn't really fit with what had previously been with the Primarchs." Yeah. But they had decided that actually it's a good place to put it. This is pretty kind of current in where we're at in the Heresy.
Very much so.
And we're aboard the Conqueror where things are going wrong. Angron and everything that's going on is affecting the Conqueror and its crew and the whole fleet and everything. And Angron and Khan has to go and talk to Angron about what's going on and break the bad news in an echo of what happened in After Deshaya.
Yes.
So
it's Demon Angron who we know it's not going to go well. It's also a direct sequel. Isn't almost the right word. It's like the other half of the story of Heart of the Conqueror, which was, I can't remember if it came out as a short story and then became an audio or the other way around. Anyway, it is a short story and there's a short audio, and it's about the navigator who is not comfortable with what she's being asked to do. And the navigator's actions at the end of that directly impact partway through Prince of Blood. There's a moment where Khan's face is destroyed, basically. Now, is that significant? Because I wasn't aware of there being anything about Khan, how previously, I think in Ant Reynolds' micro short about Khan, I forget exactly what the name of it was. He butchers one of the Red Butchers, or maybe not one of the Red, but one of the elite Terminator guys of the World Eaters. And there's a comment about how his face is not scarred, and then in this story his face gets ripped up. I mean, I don't know if that's relevant. I thought that was an interesting one. They seem to be emphasised.
Oh, you put me on the spot now, and I can't think. I think, but because basically by the time he becomes Khan the Betrayer, he's gone. But it was very much made a point of that it'd never been marked all through his story. Oh, blimey. On the spot, my mind's gone blank. Some people are probably going, yeah, of course he is. On Terror, he does this. I've got a feeling on Terror it's been noted that he's scarred. Because I know that people are going, right, where's Khan's scars?
Okay. Well, this
could be
definitely
a little bit wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, it emphasises it here. He basically gets thrown through like a glass screen, which is pretty nasty. I thought it was really interesting because it was quite slow, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was calm, it was measured to start off with, and there's quite a lot from the perspective of Latara Saren, so the ship mistress of the Conqueror, and then it's all a bit like dark and depressing.
Yes.
Angron's presence has turned all the water on the ship to blood, so she's sort of hallucinating because she's not drunk anything for days. And it's really grim. And then sort of disaster happens, and Khan, like I say, ends up having to go and talk to Angron, which he's not happy about doing. He doesn't really think he's going to get through it. But then it was that brilliant reflection of After the Share, but it's also the conversation that Khan has with Demon Angron is so interesting because it's all about the Legion's perspective on Angron and their relationship with him, and the fact that they can never do anything that pleases him, but at the same time, that, how do you say, it's like this idea that they want to do anything they can to please him, but what they really want is to just have him, and they want him to be there, and they want him to be what they need, and he doesn't want any of that. And this is, in a short story, this is a really clever exploration of those concepts that post-demonhood Angron, trapped. He's like, why are you keeping me here? Like, what is going on? And Khan's going, but we just want to help. We just want to connect. It's really actually quite cleverly done.
Yeah, a big part of the World Eater story, actually, that they want him more than he needs them. You know, they need him more than he needs them.
Yeah.
And looking at what's happened in the Heresy with Ferrus, and you see what's happened, or at other points when people, the Salamanders, they feel like they've lost their Primarch.
Yeah.
And anything's better than that. So it doesn't matter what the situation, he's still we're still his. It's an interesting take and leads very much it's the next step towards the World Eaters becoming what we know as the World Eaters later on. There was one bit I really liked, was the Red Butcher who got his position without fighting, and the disdain that is felt by Khan towards him.
And the irony of that, if you've read that, I think is it called Khan the Eightfold Path? So it's Ant Reynolds. I think that again was originally a micro short audio. It was an Advent story years ago, and it's basically Khan in the fighting pits, and he's having a scrap with this guy who is one of those elite Terminators, and then Angron, basically like Demon Angron, screams, and the red mist descends, and Khan sort of wakes, and he's literally butchered this guy, and that means in the rules of the World Eaters that he now takes the place of this guy in Angron's elite bodyguard, which of course is a laughable concept anyway. Like, Angron doesn't need a bodyguard. But that guy he kills, he's like, I'm not going to take that place. Like, I'm just going to ignore it. The guy who took his place is that character from Laurie's story. And so the irony of Khan having that real sneering disdain is that he's the reason that guy's there. It's great. really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very good. Right. The Ancient Awaits by Graham McNeil.
This is really hard to talk about without giving it away, without spoiling stuff.
Absolutely. I don't think we will spoil too much, except to say that various people on the internet will assume that Laurie had written this.
Yeah, they will.
Essentially, we've got a couple of thousand sons, or a Vistario of the Thousand Sons, on a journey with a couple of his fellow followers, and they find the ruins of a city. And this is way down the line, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's not specified, but it's long past the heresy.
Yeah, absolutely. Where they find someone or something of note. And
it's really hard to say much more about that. I mean, there's quite a lot of classic McNeil Thousand Sons. I really like his depiction of the Thousand Sons. I love the different disciplines and the enumerations and all that sort of stuff. There's some really interesting stuff about their perspective on Magnus. They're not really very keen on him. Quite a lot of the Thousand Sons stuff we've seen, pre and post heresy, there's still a real degree of sort of fatherly respect and love from the sons up to Magnus. They still really care about him. Vistario, possibly less so. He's not quite so enamoured of what his father's become. I think possibly because Magnus has set him a really bloody difficult job.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, like you say, they reach the target of their search. And it becomes clear that there are more characters in this story than we originally expected. And there are some connections to earlier in the heresy and later, like post-heresy. And I don't think we can really say much more about the plot. I think it's classic Graham, so interesting characters, good. He's got a knack for a story. I think the sort of the first, like the revelation is cool. But I thought it was all a bit blunt, actually. It was a bit telegraphed, sort of as soon as you realise what's going on.
Sure.
It was a little bit obvious what was going to happen.
Right.
And there's a moment, there's literally the final line, which is a little bit sort of on the nose. I think it's cool. I think it does feel a little bit like Graham's had this plan for a story to wrap something up from ages ago, and that he's always wanted to do it, and it's kind of cool, but maybe it's not as developed as it could have been.
Yeah, it feels very much like a concept that they wanted to do, or wanted to do, where actually it maybe needed a different story, or I don't know, something different, but the idea was to complete task A in doing what it did. And it wasn't bad. It just didn't stand out. The thing that makes it stand out is the characters that are involved.
Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right. It's not bad in any way. It's perhaps just a bit flat. I think this one would have made a much better novella with more characters, a couple more characters, but really more time spent in the second half of it, and just more development put into something that could have been really cool. There's also a certain inevitability to it, that you sort of know what's going to happen and you know that it's not going to be earth-shattering.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's still interesting, and especially if you're a Thousand Sons fan, it's good. But then, before we talk about the last story, what I thought was really interesting was the first half of this book is the first few stories are so good. It became a bit weirder towards the end, and I'd been reading it one at a time and then writing my review and then going on to the next one. And as it got towards the end, I was thinking these last two are a bit odd. So Graham's one, like we talked, was a little strange. And the final one, I remember when I first picked up the book, I was like, cool, a Dan Abnett story. This is going to be ace. And I did enjoy it very much. It's called Misbegotten.
Very different.
Very different. I mentioned earlier this whole unreliable narrator concept. This is the most prominent example that I have ever seen in heresy. Because it's like a different view on the entire thing. Or not on the heresy, but on the entire Great Crusade. It's written from like a big picture. I can't remember what the term is. Like that sort of all-seeing eye perspective. And it's almost like an oral retelling of a story, except it's a story. It's about the Crusade and stuff going on in the Crusade, like you've never seen it described before. So the idea is that just before the Ullanor campaign starts, Horus is regrouping. He's pulling the disparate elements of his expedition fleet together, and most of them, I think Loken and Cruz, captains, found dead planets. Everyone else came back with peaceful compliances, which it sort of implied that the Crusade was all about peaceful compliance first, and they only resorted to violence if they had to. So, interesting. But one particular captain, whose name I've forgotten, Captain Sejanus, that's it, has got stuck. And it's the last of the compliance missions that needs to be dealt with before they can set sail for Ullanor. And it's on a sort of an outpost, Velik Tarn, where his entire company is being held at bay by a small number of very desperate, human descendants who vehemently refuse compliance.
Yeah, and I think that's key because Sejanus is, you remember back to that first book, he's the guy who was sent in because he was so good at this.
Exactly. So he's the golden-tongued child sort of thing. And Horus ends up going and giving him a hand to get it done. And that in itself doesn't sound that weird, but it's just this, right from the outset, you get this sense of, this is a perspective on the Crusade that I am not familiar with. This idea of, they've prepared themselves for war better than any in the history of the galaxy, but their first objective is peace. That is interesting. I mean, it simply doesn't chime with what we're used to, but it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talked, there's a couple of stories here about perspective. And that's what you want to be telling terror. But, peace when you're holding a raised fist, ready to strike in the other hand, absolutely. And that's, part of kind of what carries on with this story. And you get the damn thing of introducing a suitably unique enemy, which there are twists to that as well. I kind of liked it, but it was weird. It was really weird.
There's a ton of cool stuff in there. It's called Misbegotten because they end up fighting these things which get nicknamed like Misbegots. Essentially, genetic, sort of machine-human hybrids that are really freaky biomechanical horrors. And you can see why Sejanus is having difficulty. But it boils down to the main antagonist and the guy who's behind it. And there's a conversation that essentially him and Horus have, which throws an entirely different perspective on the Emperor, the Primarchs, the Crusade, the whole point of the entire thing. And I really think this is a story that will piss a lot of people off.
Yep.
That a lot of people just won't get it, won't like it, won't want to get it, and will just go, oh, that's rubbish. Personally, I have a very hard time ever saying that a Dan Abnett story is rubbish, because he is such a sort of craftsman with his writing. He does such a good job of it, and I think objectively the story is excellent. It's very interesting, very well told, but it's just so weird, and it is weird for Black Library in its stylistic choices, but it's weird in its concepts for the heresy, and a very strange note to end the anthology on.
Yeah. So essentially, without kind of breaking it, we get a truth from someone who has a very different viewpoint on things. Do you think this story could have been written inside the heresy? Potentially if it had been manoeuvred differently. Do you think it could even have been written earlier on in the series of the books?
Yeah, I actually think it might have worked better. For example, if it had been in Tales of Heresy, alongside things like The Last Church.
Essentially, yeah.
Because I think those stories where the heresy was still fresh, and we didn't quite know what to expect, and the vocabulary and the tonal choices of the heresy hadn't quite been fully nailed by that point, it might have. I think it would have still thrown a lot of people, but perhaps people would have been more open to it then. I think as it stands now, it's a very brave choice. I think it's a brave choice from Dan. It's a brave choice from BL to put it out at all. But yeah, I think you're right. I think if it had come earlier, people would have got it more, and it would have felt more in character and in keeping with the series, with the youth of the series.
Sure. I think there's a potential if, going back in time, if Black Library could only know now, only know them what they know now, and plan things very, very differently. We all know that, the whole series would look so different.
Yeah.
And that's life. That's what it is. But you could, maybe the first or the second anthology book that came out could have been the alternative view on the heresy. So you could have had The Last Church, a few other ones where they really question everything we know, the Great Crusade, things like that. Because again, it's all questioning. It's all more kind of meat into the grinder of conspiracy and trying to work out who was right, who was wrong, and all that kind of jazz. And it feeds into that very well. But yeah, it's a bit of an outlier.
It definitely is. I think it's a very valuable story to tell. It's a perspective on Horus that I don't think we've had before. Right. Never mind the rest of what's going on. I think if you have got the book and not yet read this, or as and when it comes out, just go into it with an open mind and don't be put off by the first couple of pages, where you're reading it thinking, what is going on? I don't understand. Just have faith and keep going, and it does make sense, and it ties together beautifully, but it's blooming weird.
Awesome.
And I think so. Like I said, I think it ends the book on a weird note, and on almost like a bit of a downer, because you finish that story and go, I need to process this, and I think sometimes the running order almost of an anthology is quite an important thing. For example, I keep coming back to Tales of Heresy, where it opens with Blood Games. You're like, boom, straight in. This is so interesting. This is a new feel for Black Library. Great. And I think the Passing of Angels starts this off really well. I think Misbegotten ends it on an odd note that maybe is to the detriment of the book overall.
Right.
But then it's like you sort of think that and go, well, but where else would you put it? You can't open with it. If you sit it in the middle, it's going to feel a little bit like, what's this doing?
I kind of don't mind in a way. Yes, it's a strange story, but it's telling another side of the Emperor. Actually, when you're talking about Blood Games opening, boom, say, John's story in here gives you a real insight into something. Well, The Last Church gave an alternative view on the Emperor. And actually, this Misbegotten does give us a slightly alternative view on the Crusade, the Emperor, everything, and Horus himself. So there is a little bit of an echo in that respect, but the manner of the storytelling is so unusual for a Black Library book.
Definitely is.
But that's cool. Yeah, I think it's cool.
And overall, I think it's telling that personally, my least favourite story of the 8 is from Graham, and I really like Graham stuff.
Yeah,
and if you think that's the least good one, I think that demonstrates that, in my opinion at least, the strength of the anthology as a whole. There are some very interesting stories that take different approaches, show some of these characters in really unexpected lights. Like I said before, we could debate till we're blue in the face whether some of these should be Primarch stories. The fact is they are.
Yes.
They all are about Primarchs, even if Primarchs are not in them very much. So I think it's legitimate to include them all. I'm not sure I necessarily would have done if it was my choice.
I wonder if there's a little bit of a kind of feeling that we shouldn't have named it the Primarch series, because talking to Laurie again, that question was raised with the last Lord of Terror, whatever it's called. But actually, in the fact that it handled talking about the Primarchs, it kind of made its way in. But I think if that title was a little bit looser, then, although could it be? What could you title it? I suppose that's the problem, to tie them all together, because we're jumping, as as we said, we're now jumping from stories set right at the start of the Great Crusade all the way till post-heresy,
and including like mid-heresy.
Yeah, it's everything in between. So it's clear that first, the first idea of the 18-book set, either Great Crusade or Early Heresy or what have you, the odd origin story maybe, that's expanded big time now. So actually, the Primarch series itself can push on and tell stories now that don't necessarily fit into a set period of time, like the Scouring, like the Heresy, or whatever. All of a sudden, it's like, I've had a good idea for a Primarch story. Well, where does it fit? Oh, it doesn't really. Cool. Chuck it in the Primarch series.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is a bit like that concept of the Heresy as a setting. So we're going to get 18 books that are full-on Primarch books. Cool. So there's going to be one book for each Primarch. I'm entirely happy with that. All the rest of these Primarch stories, I sort of think of as something a bit different.
Yeah.
They're labelled as Primarchs, but in my head they're almost not. That there are those 18 books, and then there are separate things. And those 3 audios, Grandfather's Gift, and these 8 stories are the first stories in the Heresy as a wider setting. For me, that's how I'm approaching reading them. So I think the Primarch books, it's all about, can we tell an origin story if there hasn't been one and it's relevant, or if not, can we tell a really cool story that's looking at something fundamental to the character, the nature of these beings? Great. So there's going to be 18 of those. The short stories, they're still examining the Primarchs, but they're not looking at them in the same depth and the same detail, or really in the same way. So, cool. I mean, I don't think BL could really have come up with a third series name. No. Horus Heresy the Primarchs, Horus Heresy, the stuff we don't know what to do with. They couldn't do that, so they've labelled them Primarchs. Cool. Yeah. In my head, and you guys, everyone listening might completely disagree with me, that's fine. But I just sort of think of this as just treat it a little bit different. Don't look for the same thing in these stories as you do in the Primarchs novels.
No, I think that's fair. It'll be interesting to see where they go. Really will. Because I'm not 100% sure they're sure. Because these things evolve. No. And that's fair enough. But, exciting times. Awesome. We should leave that there. We've talked a fair while.
We certainly have. Well, I guess one more thing. I really hope this does get a wider release. And sometime soon. I know it's kind of cool to get something exclusive. But if what I heard was right, that they're only printed 1,000 copies of this, like, more people that really really should get to read these. If nothing else, for the authors to get their work out. Yeah. So
I can see no reason why they wouldn't come out at the very least as ebooks.
Yeah, exactly. I just hope that happens sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
I think
it's really
the onus is on BL to say, these are really good stories, let's just make them available.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right, we'll leave it there, and we'll get you back on soon to talk about something else.
I shall look forward to it.
All right, take it easy.
Cheers.
And that's another episode done. White Dwarf arrived in the period of time between recording various elements of this show. They've got the full kind of preview of the Betrayal at Calth game, looking pretty good.
Yes.
Isn't it? So this is the game that I got to. Well, I didn't experience the game, but I experienced the world at the LVO through the virtual reality side of it. So this is a game that you can play through a virtual reality system, or you can just play it as a turn-based strategy, as a normal turn-based strategy on a PC. I think they were talking about getting it to console at some point as well.
Okay, yeah, because it mentions here that it has a tactical overhead view and a first-person view.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
sounds cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The gameplay itself is Betrayal at Calth. Right? You are playing the Betrayal at Calth board game on a computer, which I kind of like. Turn-based strategies for me are one of my favourite genres of computer gaming, and they died out for a while, but they've come back strong, which is really cool. If you do have a VR setup, just walking around looking at the dreadnoughts and stuff is amazing. Excuse me. Is amazing. So, yeah, it's probably worth doing it. If you're a big Heresy fan and you've got a VR system, go for it. It's really cool. And the guys seem really cool as well, really into what they're doing. The independent characters did a interview with them a few months ago, so you could potentially go and search that if you're interested even more. But yeah, some stunning work going on in that. Really is. It really is. And also, a brief shout out to Ben Greaves, who's got his army in White Dwarf as well. I haven't got my copy yet, so Neil gets to see it, but that's a large Iron Warriors army.
It does, and it does look the business. Admittedly, although his photo in there looks a bit stupid, but his army looks great.
Well, that's a pretty representative photo, I think. It's alright. He probably won't listen to this episode. It's fine. That's just really cool. But what's really important again is representation for Heresy from GW.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really cool because obviously it's those sort of collecting segments where they sort of, take some nice big shots of the army. And he has got a fantastic army. He's so good at getting stuff done and to a really high standard.
It gets done fairly quick as well.
His Iron Warriors looks fantastic.
Yeah, he does nice little touches on it as well. It's a very effective army. Ben will tell you that he chose the Iron Warriors partly because they were easy to paint, but he achieves what he achieves very well, and it's a good standard, and he can do that. So there's absolutely no taking away from his ability there. Looks really cool, and as we say, I think it's really important that Heresy gets that kind of push forwards, to keep it in the mind of people who maybe don't play it yet. In that same vein, on Facebook, we had Rory writing his Imperial Fist list. Did you see that?
I didn't see that, no.
So they just, randomly one day were like, Dawn's come out, how about trying to write an army, based on whatever. And Rory had an example of his Imperial Fist army that he put out, and it was just a nice little thing, got a few people talking about, the way he was, writing lists and whatever. It was, Rory's quite a theme guy, so it felt like an Imperial Fist force, shall we say. Maybe not quite the same way that some of the lists that come to events look, but that was cool. But again, it's good to have those little bits out there, and hopefully that can continue. Get some more Heresy on the stream at some point, which is only going to get harder.
I do think if you see a really nicely painted Heresy army, that's the biggest way of getting people into collecting Heresy stuff, because it just looks so amazing when it's all aboard. Well,
I'm even thinking about, this year running London Heresy and then Blood and Glory, the Heresy events there, which hopefully we're going to expand upon what we're doing there. But one of my first thoughts was actually Blood and Glory last year. We got a lot of interest in our armies on the Sunday when we put them out to show, but the Warhammer guys were already in their game. Age of Sigmar were already starting their next game and things like that. And actually, I'm considering moving the army judging to the Saturday, so it stands alone a little bit, and maybe we can. We can then time it around other things that are going on to allow more people time to look at it. That might not work because Blood and Glory is expanding, and I don't know how or who they're putting where in terms of the different parts of the venue. So we'll have to look at that, but about giving people the opportunity to find what's cool about the Heresy. And there are still certain things that are different. Yes, you can use, a lot of the vehicles and stuff now in 40k, but actually competitive 40k where, a great percentage of 40k lies at events anyway, they're not effective for that. So you still don't see anywhere near the same amount of even like mastodons. Yeah, I haven't seen many at events, but I'll put money on them not being many at the 40k events. So even if you've got two or three of them. So it stands out, and that's something that we need to be aware of a little bit as well. No hobby system can rest on its laurels ever. And we as a community, it's quite funny actually. I was talking to Ben, who runs Blood and Glory, and we were talking about numbers and things like that, just to get an idea of where we're going to be, what space we need. And he said, isn't Heresy struggling at the moment? And I'm like, well, actually, now the rule book's out, the Age of Darkness book, things have settled down a bit in terms of reaction as to 7th and 8th and whatever. But even then, London Heresy sold all its tickets, which is quite a lot of tickets. Tarsus sold out very quickly. Other events, loads of different places that are selling out, that are selling all their tickets. So there's possibly still a perception that Heresy's not doing very well. But if we can go to Blood and Glory and sell, an 80 player event and have Friday night games and Saturday night games with awesome looking armies, then people are going to go, oh, actually, yeah, that is still going. Okay, cool. Because it can be quite easy for people just to think, oh yeah, I thought that just disappeared a little bit. But yeah.
I think you're right. It's all about we all know that there's some of the really good events, the ones that are super duper popular, because we've got that much more narrative driven type of game set. They sell really quickly, whereas your Throne of Skulls Heresy probably doesn't sell out as quickly, and that sort of general sort of gaming ones maybe, and maybe that's where people are judging it, but the real sort of narrative driven stuff seem to go like hotcakes.
Well, they're not sure. I mean, GW only announced that one campaign weekend, haven't they? So, where do people find out? If you don't play Heresy, where are you finding out about the Heresy? If you don't go to Heresy 30k or the Heresy part of Bolter and Chainsword, where are you going to talk about Heresy? Yeah, so we kind of got to be out there a little bit. And we have to take our part in that as a community, as an independent community. It's sort of the same thing where we talked about The Hobbit before on this podcast. And if you mention on a podcast that The Hobbit's not doing well, actually you get a fair few people emailing you going, well, actually, independent events are doing very well, blah, 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 blah. But unless you're part of that, you don't see it. And that's easy to happen with a smaller game. And it's not necessarily a problem, but if you want to keep bringing people in, then you need a way to do that. So, yeah, we'll do that. We'll try and do that as much as we can. And the podcast scene means that it's easy to find podcasts. It's easy to find Facebook pages. It's easy to find Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts. So that's good. And that's what we need to keep doing as a community, being positive and working through that. So that's cool. But I think that's pretty much it for this episode. Just to do all the usual. If you've got any feedback, if you've got any questions, you've got any topics, you want to tell us what we missed off talking about our hobby areas, you can email greg@theimperialtruth.com.
And I'm Neil@theimperialtruth.com.
And don't forget to enter the prize to win the quite awesome daylight lamp. You have to go to Neil's Instagram @NeilPaints, and what did we say? You have to like it and then comment and tag a friend. I don't even have to be a friend. Tag someone.
Tag anyone.
Tag anyone.
We don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do that, and we'll draw that when we record the next episode. So you've got just under, probably about 2 weeks to get that done. So, crack on with that, and we'll I'll probably announce that on the Facebook and Twitter as well for people. So that's good. Patreon. So, again, massive thank you to anyone who supported us with Patreon. If you feel like the show is worth a tip, then you can head to Patreon and search for us. The links will be in the show notes for here as well. And I say it works like a tip jar. You tip us how much you think we're worth tipping. If everyone on the show, if everyone who listened tipped us $1, that would be phenomenal. I know that's not going to happen. But, a massive thank you to anyone who has tipped us on that. And, I think that's pretty much done. Have you got anything you want to mention before we go, Neil?
No, nothing from me.
Awesome. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.